Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is in an interesting position within the franchise. Before I got into the series, I would always hear everyone sing the praises of Xenoblade 1. People say that it's one of the best JRPGs, no, one of the best games of all time. A timeless masterpiece that changes your life if you were to even approach a copy of it. And the same goes for Xenoblade 3, but the second game is quite different. A lot of people really love it. I see a lot of fan art, a lot of fan discussion, but I would also see a lot of people go out of their way to attack or shit-talk it, because of things like the character designs, out-of-context scenes, or other things that they've heard, causing the fans to start defending it even more strongly in the reaction to that. And because of this divide, the conversations surrounding this title are often pretty hostile. There are definitely some chill gamers out there that just love every game in the series, and obviously all of this depends on which corners of the community you frequent, but this was my experience. All of this to say that when I started Xenoblade 2, I had no idea what to expect, especially because my experience with Xenoblade 1 didn't exactly line up with the general consensus. Now that I mentioned my opinion of this game though, this video is actually a part 2 in a series that I'm doing. Back in November of 2023, I'm always surprised when I hear how long it's been, I made a video, my experience with Xenoblade Chronicles 1. And in that video, I said this. And this video will also be part 1 of a series of videos on my channel. In the end, my goal is to have a video on every single Xenoblade game. And today I'm finally uploading the second part. It's not mandatory to watch that video, but I would recommend it, as it will provide some more details to where I was at with the series before starting this title. I'll give a quick TLDR for context though. Plus, opinions always evolve over time, so this is where I'm at with Xenoblade 1 today. If you don't care, there are timestamps, you can do whatever you want. But as you can already see from the thumbnail, I'm not really the biggest fan of this game. Everyone would always hype it up to insane amounts, but then I played it and I thought it was just okay. Not in the way that I would call it a bad game or anything, but it undeniably disappointed me. It has things that I like in it. Character-wise, I really like Melia and Elvis, and Shulk is alright, but I'm indifferent about the rest of the cast and they couldn't really get me to care about any of them. Story-wise, it did have a strong start, but when they left the village, the game quickly started to lose me. In the later half, it got better again and I actually did really like the ending, surprisingly, but it was mostly just a couple of cool moments contained within a 60+ hour game. Let's just say that if it wasn't for all the online buzz around it, I probably wouldn't have even given it a second thought after rolling credits, if I would have even reached credits. I might sound a bit harsher on this game now than I did in my video, but one, that's because this is just a quick TLDR, I'm not really argumenting my points right now, and two, over time, I honestly care less and less about this game, and even if I would love to care more, that is sadly just how it is. If you want more detailed thoughts and my reasoning behind everything that I said just now, you know where to go. But even then, I was kind of excited for the sequel. Everyone that praised Xenoblade 2 would always talk about the characters, and as a big fan of character-driven stories, that got me really curious. The trailers were also great, and I liked the aesthetic of the game. I often see people criticize it for how anime it looks, but personally, I love anime, so what can I say? I've been watching the medium since 2015, it was my gateway into JRPGs, and I just really like it. While others act like the goofy, blushy, crushy scenes stole their lunch money, I just simply see that as some dumb fun. Sure, the character designs are a bit much, and that did have me worried for a possible reliance on fan service, but I'm not gonna write off an entire game purely based on that. Otherwise I would have never touched the Nier games, and those are masterpieces. But it turns out that I didn't have much reason to be worried, and my excitement was not misplaced in the slightest, as I ended up loving Xenoblade 2. Like, I really love this game. I first completed it in late 2023, but things got in the way of me making this video back then. I did talk about it in my yearly look back video, so my love for it is no secret. I even bought the freaking art book. This thing is in Japanese, like, I don't understand any of this. But before we continue, I do want to give a quick spoiler warning, as I will be talking about the entirety of this game. So if you don't want to be spoiled, I'm sorry, but this isn't the video for you. But if you do like videos like this, make sure to leave a like, leave a comment, and check out my channel. Any support is greatly appreciated. Thank you guys a lot. But let's actually talk about Xenoblade 2 now, because as much as I adore this game now, my experience with it was off to quite a rocky start. I said that I completed the game in late 2023, December to be specific, but I actually started it way before. Back then, it had been some months already since I finished Xenoblade 1, but it was right after I wrote my script for that video. I always said that I was gonna play 2 ASAP, and my friends kept telling me to just get on with it already, so I booted it up for the very first time in April 2023. Where Xenoblade 1 started with a big spectacle, showing the world in a bombastic flashback, this game starts really quiet and understated. I really like how it opens in a dark, brooding storm, only for us to break through the clouds and be blinded by the light, guiding us to a gorgeous view, which turns out to be quite fitting, as a lot of the contents of this game are pretty dark, with our protagonist shining a light on the beauty within this world. I'm getting ahead of myself though. Once the camera drops out of the clouds, we're immediately greeted by this massive expanse of nothing. A cloud sea stretches out as far as you can see. We see someone in a diving suit salvage a crate from this sea, but not a word is being spoken. We see that this is Rex, our protagonist, and all of this got me incredibly intrigued already. I really love how the game just drops you into this, especially in the context of the series. It's only after Rex sits down to get some food that we get a bit of background to all of this. Talking about the architects, the history of humanity being cast out of Elysium, forcing us to inhabit this dying world, but since it's from his POV, this also leaves us with a lot of questions. Is the architecture, this Elysium, even real? Does any of this connect to the first game? Could this possibly even be the same world, or is it a completely separate thing? Could the architect maybe even be someone we know? I was going into this completely blind, so I had no idea, and neither does Rex, as he doesn't fully understand this world or his purpose in it yet. These are just myths that he thinks about as he goes about his daily routine of salvaging scrap. And shortly after this, when we arrive at the trade ship, we see that he donates most of what he earns this job to his hometown. It's a small action, but immediately tells us so much of his kind-hearted nature. Sadly though, after this opening, the game started to dip for me, but you should have seen that coming. I did say that we were off to a rocky start. Once we sent the money off to his hometown, I started doing quite a bit of side content. Not necessarily because I felt like it, but I really wanted to like this game. I didn't exactly vibe with Xenoblade 1, so this time I wanted to get fully invested. So let's play hide and seek, do the diving minigame, learn the combat, but doing all of this kind of pushed the game's worst aspects in my face right from the start. The HUD and UI feels really weird, especially that compass, which I'm convinced is just wrong most of the time. Rex's voice acting also felt kinda spotty, and even if the combat eventually becomes great, it feels quite awkward when you're just getting started. The controls in general just felt really weird, with the directional buttons being used for tutorial menus for some reason. I feel like there are better things to put on these buttons, like things we actually use, but whatever. Eventually I continued the story, and so I arrived at the introduction of Chin and Mallows. And the fact that they used Tetsuya Nomura's art for these guys was honestly one of the funniest things when I first saw it. They're the most suspicious looking people you can imagine. Don't get me wrong, I absolutely love these designs. Nomura is my goat, but looking at them, next to Nia and Rex, I feel like it's pretty clear that something is up here. This is also where we first get introduced to Nia, and I really liked her from the offset. Her back and forth with Rex are a lot of fun. I instantly fell in love with their dynamic. Her accent was a bit unexpected, but while I have my issues with the dub, this is an aspect of it that I really like. Even if her voice would definitely take some getting used to. Let's just say that this voice is not what I expected after seeing her design.
At least I wouldn't wet myself for the promise of a measly underground.
It's just cool how different accents are are used to show the diversity in this world. And now that these introductions are done, the story immediately kicks into high gear. We set out on our mission, we find the Xenoblade, Rex dies because, big surprise, evil looking characters are evil, and then we wake up in heaven? We find Pyra there because of course heaven has anime waifus, but then it turns out that this is Elysium. We hear church bells while we form a pact with her to get revived like it's fucking Drakengard or something.
What? A pact? There's no other way!
And we're back to fight off Jin and Malos before making our escape. The music and action was awesome, the villains were immediately established as being leagues ahead of us, and the fact that Pyra only just woke up, brought us back to life, and is already able to fight back against them, gave her an incredibly strong introduction. But amidst all of this, there were sadly a lot of things that still held it back for me. The awkward combat and controls, the shitty UI, and even if I talked about this earlier in the sense that it wouldn't affect my enjoyment, when I first saw Pyra, her design did feel weirdly fan-servicey. Her back is open, calling her short is kind of an understatement. She has thigh highs and a skin-tight suit, pretty obviously highlighting certain assets. It's like she walked out of Stellar Blade or ZZZ or something. I had seen her design before, but seeing her in-game felt odd because she just felt out of place here. And another thing that started to bother me more was Rex's voice. This is not me shitting on the VA or anyone involved, but in moments like this where he is screaming and getting all emotional, it just didn't hit. I didn't feel the emotion, and that, more than anything, took me out of it. And while playing through this opening, I constantly had this voice in the back of my head telling me that I need to continue playing. I should ignore these criticisms because I need to enjoy this game. I did not want to make another video on a game that I dislike, or worse, a game that I'm indifferent about. While playing these opening hours, I was still in the process of making that Xenoblade 1 video, so I was really dreading that this game could possibly end up in the same boat. This is not me complaining about boohoo I make YouTube videos though, this is a hobby that I absolutely adore, but it is just to show that I wasn't really in the right mindset when I started playing this game. Some criticisms I definitely still stand by, but a lot of my other complaints felt kind of petty, or problems that could have been solved if I was just patient enough and gave the game enough time. It honestly feels really stupid to admit this because it is so obvious, but my original experience with this game ended up the way that it did because I was playing the game not because I wanted to, but because I made myself feel like I had to. And that only made all of my issues with it stand out so much more. But then, as if it was a sign from the architect, a little game known as Zelda Tears of the Kingdom released. So I thought, you know what, maybe I should put Xenoblade 2 on hold, play this other game, and return to Xenoblade when I actually felt like experiencing it and giving it a proper go. So fast forward to November of 2023, and the feeling was randomly there. So I made a new save file and progressed until meeting Pyra. I still disliked the controls and the navigation system, but I was ready to give it some more time. This time around I was also used to the fan service. Nowadays I don't even think twice about it, to be honest, but I do remember having those thoughts originally, especially later when the camera takes some interesting angles. The biggest detractor in this second attempt was honestly the dub. So in the middle of the big action scene, I opened the menu, almost crashed out when I didn't see a Japanese option, but then I closed the game, realized that I had to download the Japanese audio pack, installed it, turned it on, and I never looked back. I was definitely gonna miss out on some cool things, mostly the accents that I mentioned earlier, but it was a trade-off I was willing to make. Plus, you know, Xenoblade 2 is incredibly anime, so I feel like the Japanese voices were just gonna fit perfectly. Which they did. I rewatched the cutscenes, and third time's the charm, I guess, because everything hit. I continued playing and ran into some weird things like the death and instant rebirth of Gramps, which I guess that was a scene. I don't know why they played off Rex's breakdown as a joke, but sure. It is pretty funny though how Gramps turns into this little creature and crawls into Rex's helmet, only to never ever leave it. Bro is just chilling there for the next 60 to 70 hours, and it's kind of funny when there's an emotional scene to think that he is just there. Continuing on, we got to our first field skill check, and I really like the concept of these. Being able to utilize your blades outside of combat to open up a path is just a really cool idea in my opinion. I'm definitely talking about the issues with this system later, don't you worry, but for now, they were innocent, I was clueless, and I honestly just loved this idea. So I continued playing, and before reaching town, I was just doing these random things as you do. I was walking around, looking at the environment, listening to the music, fighting some random enemies, running away from the super high level mobs who are here for some reason. I went into the menu, and that's where I noticed that I could switch playable characters. So I switched to Nia, and then I saw that when she's running, she actually rides Dromag, which is such a awesome detail that adds so much personality to just everything. I just continued messing around like this, and then after a solid 20 minutes of doing nothing at all, I just stopped myself. And I vividly remember saying out loud, "Fuck, I'm enjoying a Xenoblade game." Yes, that was the intro music. Yes, we are 15 minutes into the video, but don't worry about it. Until now, this video was basically completely focused on my original experience with Xenoblade 2, but from this point on, it's actually going to be a mix between that playthrough and my more recent replay that I did in order to make this video and record footage and stuff. Because both of these experiences ultimately came together to form what has become my experience with Xenoblade 2. And this first chapter held up incredibly well across both playthroughs. It's what gave me that initial intrigue, what made me want to return after playing Zelda, and on my replay this chapter made me feel like this replay was a great idea. I was having a blast reliving these early story moments, realizing that Rex was salvaging materials from old civilizations on dead titans. The conversation about the architect abandoning humanity got a newfound meaning because the architect is simply one of many who had lost faith. Seeing this fucker Bana and remembering that for some reason he will just keep showing up, getting our first glimpse at Elysium and meeting Pyra, laughing about the thoughts that their design used to feel weird to me, or the fact that I didn't even know about Mithra back then. And all of this also made me think about the fact that I am so happy that I took a break after initially bouncing off of this game. I went pretty in depth on my original experience with this game, despite a lot of my criticisms possibly being kind of stupid, to say it like that, and despite that probably not being the best first impression for this video. But I wanted to go in depth, because I really wanted to drive home the point that sometimes you're just not in the right mindset to experience a game or any piece of media for that matter. Because if you're not in the right mindset, it can really influence your whole experience with it. If I continued to force myself through it back then, I probably would have ended up disliking the game. But now I love it. Of course, there's no way of knowing for sure, but what I do know is that there is nothing wrong with taking a step back sometimes and returning after some time has passed, when you are truly feeling ready to experience whatever you're about to engage with. But all that aside, it is pretty safe to say that Chapter 1 of Xenoblade 2 is still a fantastic opener. Outside of that scene with Gramps, at least, the emotional whiplash there is still insane. But after that, we enter Torikoff for the first time, and this is where the game introduces some new systems to us, including the controversial blade summoning. So let's switch gears for a bit and talk about the gameplay. In this game, your controllable character is known as a driver, and the power of a driver is fueled by their blade. This is both the weapon that they're holding, but also their partner character standing next to them in combat. Just like Xenoblade 1, this combat system has your character auto-attacking, with the player being in control of activating skills, swapping between your 3 currently equipped blades to chain together combos, and commanding your party to get a combo going. There is a lot more to it, like a lot more. Look at this HUD, it's a fucking mess, and there are so many things going on here, but those are the basics. Sadly, the game does not do a great job at explaining the combat at all though. So at this point in the game, my understanding only went as far as these basics. Let me tell you, the boss fight against Morak here was a real challenge. I genuinely had no idea what was going on because no bars kept showing up. They mentioned driver combos, blade combos, fusion combos, and I didn't really get it. But thankfully, this wasn't just a skill issue on my end. It's actually commonly agreed upon that this game does a really terrible job at explaining all of this. They have tutorials, but they're massive info dumps that you can't revisit. They only explain half the systems, and some of them even have misinformation, which explains why this game has so many guides on YouTube. I watched 1 or 2 of them, but I'm someone who learns by doing, so while these videos helped me get competent enough to progress for now, I still had a long way to go. For now, it was just auto-attack, cancelling the auto-attack to recharge my skills faster, which seemed pretty advanced to me at the time, then use those skills and pray to God. The gacha gods, because yup, Xenoblade 2 is a gacha game, baby, let's go. Because the way that you acquire these blades is through literal gambling. Not using real money, thankfully, but throughout the game you get these items known as primo gems, I mean core crystals, and you can have your drivers resonate with them to awaken blades. But this awakening is completely random. You can get a common blade with a basic design, or you could get a unique rare blade with a way more interesting skill set. Among the rare blades, not everyone has the same drop rate, however. There are some rare blades which are actually pretty common, while others only have a 0.1% drop rate. I feel like this is a really interesting system to talk about because it has both a lot of positives and negatives to it. The negative aspects are pretty obvious. Which blade you get is 100% based on luck, and some blades have way stronger stats than others, so you could technically get screwed over and only pull the weaker blades for an entire playthrough. It's also just objectively bad that you can play this game for hundreds of hours and never even get a glimpse at the rarer blades like Cosmos, for example. This blade, I've noticed, is a fan favorite, not only because she is one of the strongest units in the game, but she is also a reference to the Xenosaga franchise. Somehow I awakened Cosmos around halfway through my first playthrough, and I felt a significant boost whenever I had her active in my party. This did kinda make me feel like a fraud though, because a lot of my friends are super fans of the Xenoblade series, of all the Xeno games to be honest, and they never even got Cosmos, but here I am, the guy who only played Xenoblade 1, didn't even like it that much, but I do have Cosmos in my party. I guess I just got really lucky. A luck that I'm sure the 5% of my audience that are subscribed to my channel can relate to. Locking entire playable characters behind luck already sucks in free-to-play gacha games, but this is a full-priced single-player game locking content behind gacha pulls. And I think that's kinda disgusting, especially considering the amount of content tied to these blades. Because it's not just the ability to use a blade in combat, upon unlocking them you also unlock an entire questline bound to them. These are hours and hours of content that you can just miss out on, simply because you're not lucky enough to pull a certain blade. But there are also positive aspects to this. For one, I think it's important to keep in mind just how many core crystals you get. Throughout the game, they will shower you in them, so while you might not get that one blade you wanted, I'm willing to bet that every single player was able to at least make one party of blades that they liked. What's also really cool is that all of the rare blades are designed by guest artists from across the gaming and anime and manga industry. Some of these are obviously still just designed by the game's lead designer, but others are made by the artists behind Code Geass or Final Fantasy, for example. The fact that every blade has different attributes also keeps the gameplay interesting and ever evolving. You are constantly unlocking new weapons, with every blade having its own attributes, and with the blades being random, it also adds replay value, because in every single playthrough playthrough, you will unlock new blades with new abilities and new quests. Plus, the game also gives you and your party members blades throughout the story, so it's not like your playthrough is entirely dependent on these random draws. The gacha also works surprisingly well from a narrative standpoint, as nobody can really know what type of blades they will awaken when they find a random core crystal. But as much as I can see the positives, I feel really weird defending this system. When I was looking through the art book, I saw a bunch of blade designs that I would have loved to have in my party. I would have loved to learn more about these blades, to learn their story, to see what they play like. But despite playing through the whole game twice, I never got any of these. They do allow you to select what element you want your blade to be to help build your party and to kind of give a direction to the random draw, but I feel like they should have gone even further. Maybe they could have grouped certain blades together, and whenever you awaken a crystal you can pick a group to draw from, or maybe they could have decreased the amount of normal common blades that you get, as you get an insane amount of them and you're really never using them, unless you're doing a challenge run or something. But I also kind of hate that I'm talking about how to improve a gacha system, when a system like this honestly shouldn't even be there. But at the same time, I can see why they chose to introduce this system, because it does have its benefits, and I never truly hated it in my time with the game, but that also doesn't mean that I liked it. And that's why my opinion falls somewhere in the middle of this discussion. Something that I only started to fall in love with deeper, however, was the story. I adore how we keep getting so many character moments. Like, when we enter town for the first time, we immediately got a scene with Nia and the wanted poster. It's a small moment, but it's small things like this that do a lot to build character, to build relationships, and the game is fantastic at sprinkling these moments throughout the entire game. Sometimes they're a bit longer, sometimes it's just a few lines, but it does a lot of heavy lifting to make this cast as lovable as they are. And it also increases the impact for when Nia allows herself to get captured. It all adds weight and believability to the fact that Rex immediately wants to go out and save her, despite not knowing her for very long. Like, yeah, part of that is just the fact that Rex is a very good guy, and that's just who Rex is. Of course he was gonna save her. But it's all of these small moments of character building that add to the believability of this. But in order to save her, we need a plan, and since we can't just walk around town normally without attracting unwanted attention, Pyra wears a cloak for this section, and I really love that they added this. I honestly wish that the game did this way more often, because outside of Rex's redesign in the late game, stuff like this never happens again, and it's a shame. I always really like it when character designs evolve and change in relation to the narrative. But the outfit change is only the second best thing that happens here, because this is also where we get introduced to the absolute GOATs, TORNA and Poppy. People joke about them a lot, but I honestly love them. You'll see why throughout the video. But even now, from their introduction, I honestly really like them already. Their intro is pretty quirky, but it's just some harmless fun in my opinion, while also establishing their characters pretty strongly and giving them a reason to join our party. Tora's dream is to become a driver, but Lopon drivers are extremely rare, and sadly he wasn't lucky enough to be born with the ability to resonate with core crystals. But instead of giving up, he took matters into his own hands, going as far as to create Poppy, an artificial blade, following in his father's and grandfather's legacy as they shared this fate. The fact that he himself just created a blade to fulfill a dream passed down through generations gave him so much aura in my eyes. I mean, look at him. That's the definition of aura right here. But simply creating a blade isn't enough to fulfill this dream. It's only the first step, and so it's very understandable that Rex, the wielder of the Aegis blade, becomes his role model. Both of them have these unachievable dreams, but that doesn't mean that they'll give up. Rex started his journey for Elysium regardless, and TORNA created a blade, and now he decides to follow Rex, so both TORNA and Poppy can grow stronger together. This is also something that I really like about both of them. Their dreams feed into each other, as they both want to be strong enough to offer their partner support. We know about TORNA's side, but the same goes for Poppy. As an artificial blade, she wants to grow stronger to protect her driver, the one who granted her a life. Now that we have some more gamers on our side, it's time to lock in and save Nia. Breaking into her cell and getting her out was surprisingly easy though, and once again the game is doing an incredible job at sprinkling in these little bits of character work, like Rex's salvager code for example. Every now and then he will bring these up, and it's always something really silly like, help those who help you, and it's so wholesome how he just knows and follows all of these rules by heart. It's all of these little quirks that come together and make this cast so much fun. But before we can make our escape, we run into a little problem called Bridget and Morag, who are trying to capture Pyra, because as the Aegis Blade she carries enormous power. She even destroyed entire continents in the past during the Aegis War. But Rex doesn't care about that. He promised her that they would reach Elysium together, and they will. He's not the best at combat yet though, so he has to resort to some pretty cheeky tactics to win, and I really love this. It shows their resourcefulness and quick thinking, but also shows that they still have a long way to go. And following their victory, we get what is one of the nicest moments in this game, as Rex asks Nia to join him on his quest. At first, she understandably makes fun of him, calling him stupidly naive, but if that is the goal of his journey, if he can believe in a dream like that, and if something as ridiculous as Elysium could actually be real, then maybe Nia can also achieve her dream, to find a place to belong. When we first met her, she was part of TORNA, traveling together with Jin and Malos, but it's also shown that she doesn't exactly belong there. And ever since the events that happened there, she's been fighting at our side, with Rex's conviction now inspiring her to stick with us, bringing us to the best part of this chapter, the campfire scene, where everyone just shares an incredibly heartwarming moment. Fuck man, I'm like 4 hours into this game and I already love all of these characters so much. This is where we set off into the world properly, and where the game really opens up. But before leaving, I actually went back into town. I picked up some side quests and I rested at the inn, which showed me something really cool. The way that this game presents its side content, because not only can you just run into quests seamlessly while exploring the world, but resting at the inn triggered a cutscene where Pyra asks the rest of the gang to visit a specific location. So obviously I went there and I was greeted by a really nice heart-to-heart event. Heart-to-hearts are also in the first game, and they're basically optional party conversations that you can find out in the open world. There aren't that many of them, but I thoroughly enjoyed each one I interacted with. The fact that the game will organically guide you to them like this is really cool, and other side quests can also be triggered like this, so it's always worth sleeping at an inn whenever you arrive at a new town. And I really love that, as it adds a lot to the immersion and the role-playing aspects. Inns also serve another purpose, because in every battle you get active XP, which levels you on the spot, but you also get bonus XP, and this is only given to your characters when you rest, which then gives the game a chance to give you more side content. It's an incredibly strong and captivating gameplay loop that naturally keeps feeding into itself. The quest and objective tracking itself does kinda suck though. The menu is really frustrating to use, and it's not efficient at all at displaying information. It's so annoying how you can only track one quest at a time, mainly because of how big this game is and how many quests there are. A lot of them are spread out across this world really well and are positioned in between main objectives or in separate areas that you can explore, but because of the tracking and menus, it can become a real hassle to track them. But I guess the most important part is that the quests themselves are pretty good. And the story here also goes hand in hand with this exploration gameplay, as you're simply trying to reach the next town, the next titan, while helping these people along the way. Especially on my first playthrough, it was really fun to explore, find hidden areas and chests, hunt down monsters and learn the combat. Even on my replay, it was pretty enjoyable to get back into the swing of things through the structure. The most annoying thing really is just the tracking of the quest and the fact that you can sometimes get randomly one-shot from off-screen, because all around the world they sprinkled in some extremely high-level mobs. Sometimes this can make for some really fun situations where you're just exploring and suddenly this massive monster shows up, making it so you have to flee and find another way around. But at other times it can be really annoying, especially when those monsters have ranged attacks, just hitting you out of nowhere. The story being a bit slower paced here and giving you time to explore doesn't mean that it's boring though, because it's not long after that we meet our newest party member, Vandam. And as a quick side note, at some point in this chapter, my goat Zeke also shows up for the very first time. I don't have much to say about him at this point, because right now he's literally just Team Rocket. He shows up, goofs around for a bit, and then just gets blasted away. I just thought he was funny, but at this point I also had no idea that he would end up joining the party despite him literally being on the box art. I don't know how I missed that, but somehow I did. But to get back on track with what we were actually talking about, our newest party member, Vandam. He teaches us a lot about the world. We go to see a stage play together with him about the original wielder of Pyra, someone called Adam, and we also learn more about the life cycle of a blade, which confused me a bit at first, mostly the blades turning into Titans part, because how does this turn into that? But this is a plot point that comes up pretty often, so over time it all started to fall into place. And I was also really intrigued by the fact that blades are on this constant cycle of being reborn, with every reset wiping their memories, which ties into something that the narrative explores with many of its major characters, the meaning of memories and how they shape who we are. I always just love it when games explore this concept. Vandam also teaches Rex about being a driver, how he can't just spam attacks while relying on your blade to protect you, you have to work together, synergize. And I really like this, because Rex did just stumble into becoming a driver, the driver of the Aegis no less. He might be extremely motivated, but we've already seen that you need more than just motivation. And on top of all of that, Vandam also enriches our cast with his view on life. Everyone fights their own wars. His way of saying that everyone in life needs a purpose, something to fight for. And he chose his war a long time ago, to say it in his words. It's his group of mercenaries, the people he chose to protect, and he will do anything for them. Sadly though, Vandam wasn't a part of the story for long, as he meets his end at the finale of the same chapter where he got introduced, filling the role of a mentor who dies passing on his teachings, which is a trope in a few JRPGs, even if I can't name any examples for obvious spoiler reasons. But despite being an early game dev, I think his death is honestly a highlight in the narrative. It sounds kinda strange to say it like that, but the events surrounding his death that make up the finale of chapter 3 are phenomenal, tying it together with the Mithra reveal and another face-off against TORNA, where we finally start to learn some more about them, namely the fact that Jin wants to erase mankind. The way that this fight played out really pulled my heartstrings. Over these past 3 chapters, I got very attached to this entire party, so to see them get destroyed like this did hit me. And even if I didn't necessarily feel personally attached to Vandam yet, his sacrifice did leave a strong impact, because it shows how Rex's journey and just who Rex is as a person touched his heart to the point that he was willing to lay down his life for their cause. Rex isn't one to simply accept defeat though, so he keeps getting up and tries to keep fighting. And just as all hope seems lost, this is where Mithra awakens. And that part had me freaking out. I had no clue what was going on. I had only seen Mithra before online, but I literally knew nothing about her. I was always wondering how they would meet, or if Rex would eventually find a second blade or something. So watching her awaken from within Pyra was insane, literally mind-blowing to me. Even if TORNA was still able to get away, at least we were able to put up a fight now. We'll learn more about this Pyra-Mithra situation later, but now that everything is said and done with this finale to the chapter, I do want to mention that I wish they talked more about Vandam after these events. It's cool that you can use his blade, Rock, and if you decide to equip him, I guess this is kind of a non-issue, but I didn't really like his design, so I benched him, making it so Vandam's presence is basically non-existent post chapter 4, despite his undeniable impact on our cast. But that being said, I do like the direct aftermath, the stuff that happens right after the finale of chapter 3, and a lot of what happens in chapter 4 surrounding his character and his sacrifice. Because he died, but right after we see how Rex asks Minoff, the guy who wrote the Adam stage play, to write a play about Vandam, so his legacy can live on to inspire others, just like he inspired us. And if we continue his legacy, if the play keeps his memory alive, is he truly dead? All of that was handled incredibly well. At this point, there's also a pretty important lore dump about the Aegis Blade, because it turns out that many years ago, this guy called Amaltus climbed the World Tree in order to meet the architect. But instead of meeting him, all he found were 2 core crystals. He resonated with one of them and awakened Malos, but Malos is basically pure evil and started destroying everything, so they had to find a hero to fight back against him, which is how they found a pure-hearted soul named Adam, who resonated with the remaining core and awakened Mithra, with the clash between Mithra and Malos being known as the Aegis War, ending in Mithra's victory. But to achieve that, she had to resort to using her ultimate weapon, destroying the entire Titan of TORNA in the process, leading to her creating the Pyra personality and being sealed away to make sure such destruction would never happen again. And through learning about this, we can also start to connect some more dots between the war and Jin and Malos, even if at this point it didn't make that much sense to me yet, considering that TORNA, the evil guys, hate humans, but TORNA, the Titan in the civilization, was destroyed by blades. A lot to think about. We're at the start of chapter 4 now, and I don't know if it's just me, but I always felt like this game had 3 pretty distinct acts. With Act 1 being chapters 1 to 3, it's the beginning of our journey. We meet most major characters and they're setting the stage. We even get this big finale here with the Mithra reveal and Phantom Sacrifice. Chapters 4 through 6 would then be Act 2. The pacing gets a lot slower, and it's a lot more focused on deepening the world and the characters, which then leads into Act 3, where the pacing picks up again and it is just a wild ride until the end. This might seem kinda random, but I'm gonna use this structure to build my video, so it should become a bit more clear as I'm progressing through it, and if it doesn't, what are you gonna do about it? It's my video. I also think it's kinda fitting because at this point in chapter 4 we also return to the Trade Guild, the place where our journey began, so I feel like that's a nice place to start Act 2. It did feel kinda weird to return here though, with all the characters talking like, whoa, isn't it crazy to come back here after so much happened? Even though we could fast travel here at literally any point, and I actually did that a few times to clean up some side quests. Personally, I think it would have been really cool if fast travel was a bit more restrictive, because then it would have had a lot more impact when you eventually revisit locations like this. They could have even time-gated side content like Trails does it, to create a stronger sense of traveling from location to location and having to tie up all the loose ends before you move on to the next place. But that's just personal preference. I understand why they did it this way. This creates a lot less friction. Even if I think friction like that can be kinda cool sometimes, it can add more immersion and urgency to your journey, if you know what I mean. Now that we're back here at the trade center though, maybe this is a good time for me to give an update on my combat skills, because the fight earlier against TORNA was where I really had to lock in. Before I was just kinda scraping by, but if I was to ever properly learn these systems, this would be the time. Not only did I finally have a decent blade setup ready, but I also got the basics down to start trying out some more advanced combos. I still think the UI is an absolute mess and the screen is way too cluttered, but that being said, it also deserves praise for the fact that it's not just random shit thrown together. Now that I got better at the combat, every single element on screen did make sense to me, but that doesn't mean that it's not a mess. But in either case, this is where the combat really started to hit its stride for me. Using the arts or special attacks, chaining them together with my party to add special elemental cores to the enemies, building up as many different ones as possible before triggering them in an ultimate attack, creating a very satisfying chain reaction as you just see the big numbers go bigger. It looks a bit silly with the characters hitting Fortnite emotes though. It's also really fun to combine these blade combos with the driver combos, getting your party members to stun an enemy so you can launch them into the air, for example. A system that was also in Xenoblade 1, but here it felt a lot more responsive. I don't know if they actually changed or improved it, or if it was just a skill issue for me in the first game, but there I felt like I was constantly fighting against it. fighting against the game to get Ryan to finally do what I needed him to do. While here, they always did exactly what I needed when I needed it. Not only during the driver combos, but also when lining up the right elemental skills, so I could go on to create the course that I wanted to create. This combat system is a lot when you first start the game, but once it clicked, it was extremely satisfying. But I guess that brings me to the other RPG mechanics, like the affinity chart. This is basically your skill tree, with every node functioning as a mini quest for you to complete, killing a certain amount of a specific enemy, harvesting items, cooking dishes, etc. And upon completion you unlock the next quest on the chain and a reward. Stuff like HP regen or a damage bonus, you know, passive character buffs. But this chart is only one of the many progression systems, and I do mean many. We know that each driver can have 3 blades equipped at any time, and every single blade has their own chart. The drivers also have their own separate chart. You have the core crystals you can resonate with for new blades, you have weapon chips, aux cores, art levels, accessories, special blades like Poppy, who has her own completely separate progression with pop swap, part creation or crystallization, and the whole ass Tiger minigame. You have pouch items or foods that you can buy or cook if you have the ingredients, and these provide you with limited time buffs, but because it's food, every blade also has their favorite dishes or dishes that they don't like. All of this is then tied to resources that you can find within the open world, which you can then use to craft or buy items, refine aux cores, or upgrade your equipment, with each titan having unique resources through enemies and harvesting points or salvaging events, where you need to do a minigame to get items. But that minigame is bound to your diver cylinders that you need to get from a shop, and these cylinders decide which resources you get. And that's not even mentioning the merc group. There is a lot in this game, and I honestly reached a point where I was just picking up every item I saw without knowing what it did. And the worst part about this is that a lot of these systems will only give you incredibly specific bonuses, like dealing bonus damage, but only when you're outside and only at nighttime. But that also doesn't mean that you shouldn't be paying attention to these systems, because sprinkled in between all of these strange buffs are some incredibly valuable ones. Don't get me wrong, I really like in-depth RPG systems to min-max my party, but a lot of these bloated the mechanics in places where it could have been a lot more streamlined without losing depth. Complexity is nice, but it needs to be manageable. We don't need complexity just for the sake of it. And what also doesn't help is that the affinity chart, the one bound by these tedious objectives, is by far the most vital to your progression out of any of these systems. And it isn't just important in the way that you need your characters to grow stronger, it can literally prevent you from progressing the story if you don't engage with it enough. Because one of the things on this chart are the field skills. I mentioned these shortly in the beginning. These are the skills that you need to get past an obstacle blocking your path, sometimes to progress the main story and other times to reach optional chests or heart-to-hearts or something. This mechanic gets a lot of shit, and I can see why. A lot of stuff on this chart doesn't look that important, so you can easily forget that it's there, until your path gets blocked by a field skill. So you check your menu and it turns out that you gotta grind this random task until you can continue the game, completely halting your progression based on some arbitrary objective. Thankfully, my friends warned me about this though, so I would always keep the chart in my mind as I was exploring, and I would just chip away at it throughout, and it was kind of fun this way. I never really ran into any real roadblocks. This is probably the way that it was intended to be played, and to be fair, one of the first things that the game did was block your path with a field skill, probably to teach you how important they could be, but it is a bit silly. If you're going into the game blind, I can easily see how this system can become a big roadblock for you, because it is just one of the many systems, and when there's this much shit packed in a game, it only makes sense that you're gonna lose track of some of these systems. And if you happen to lose track of this one, it's gonna get really obnoxious when they suddenly just push it in your face when you run into one of those roadblocks. But with all of that being said, because of the way that I played through the game, personally, I didn't mind these field skills that much. If Pyra, for example, didn't have enough fire mastery, I could go level that skill, but I could also swap out my other blades with some random common blades that have fire mastery level 1, so those could all stack up in order to reach the threshold. But even if it wasn't a real hurdle for me on my playthrough, this system was still filled with a bunch of annoyances that could have easily been ironed out. Even if we ignore the tedious process of leveling the skills themselves, just the act of using them can already be a hassle. Let's say you run into one of these field skill checks. Well, every single time it will pause the game and show the animation to tell you that you either passed or failed. If you failed, you have to go into the menu and open the affinity chart, because this chart doesn't actually update automatically, so it's possible that you already have the skill unlocked, it's just not usable yet because you haven't opened the menu since unlocking it. So if you see that the skill is now unlocked, then that's great. You can back out of the menu again, interact with the field skill check, rewatch this slow animation and progress. But if you didn't unlock the skill, then you either have to go grind it, or you have to go to your equipment, find the right blades between the dozens of common blades that you have, equip them, progress the affinity chart if needed, clear the skill check by rewatching that animation, go back into the menus and equip your main blades again. That is a massive process just to get past a random obstacle that is placed there for literally no reason. They could easily improve this by, for example, allowing us to use the skills from blades that are currently benched, so I don't have to change around my party the entire time. Or just don't pause the game at every single skill check to show me that I only have 2 out of 3 Nopon wisdom. The fact that these skill checks show up so often, even for small stuff like harvesting plants, has a massive impact on how this game flows from moment to moment. I'm saying this as someone that didn't even mind the system that much, but it is genuinely surprising that it made it into the final product the way that it is now. And the final talking point about this affinity chart is that for some reason the blade quests are also linked to it, which is really annoying because these quests are some of the best form of side content in the game, at least in terms of their actual content. You already have to get lucky with unlocking a specific blade in order to get their quest, and then you're telling me I gotta deal with these dull affinity objectives? Some blades even need you to use the merc group mechanic to progress their quests, which feels like it's ripped straight out of a mobile game. These are quests where you send your blades off on their own for a couple of real life hours. I tried to use it on my first playthrough a few times, but I quickly lost interest, and on my second playthrough I don't think I ever opened this menu at all. I literally forgot that it was even there because it does not add anything to this game. That's what I meant earlier with a lot of the systems here being added for the sake of it. They don't really add anything at all. I wanted to get invested in these blade quests. You unlock the first part of them whenever you unlock a blade, so I started a lot of them and I always really liked them. I also really love the concept behind them. It's so cool how your blades are your weapons, but blades aren't just tools in this universe. They themselves are people with a story. So learning more about them through a unique quest line was awesome. But then they feel the need to force me to interact with so many random and obscure systems that at that point I was just like, you know what? I think I'm good. I'll just stick to the main story and progress from there. This is where my experience between my first playthrough and my recent replay started to feel pretty different. Which is interesting, because before this they actually more or less lined up. The following chapters were a bit of a lull on my original playthrough, but in the end I still thoroughly enjoyed my time with it. But on my recent replay, the game actually felt like it would drag on quite often in this section. The first 2 chapters were all about getting to know the story, characters and gameplay, building towards the bombastic finale in Chapter 3. Stakes had never been higher. But then the following chapters, with Chapter 4, immediately steps on the brakes. It makes sense because the story needs to breathe, so this is a smaller scale chapter. It has more downtime with the characters to help everyone process what just happened. And all of that is great. But in between those moments, there would also be a lot of nothingness and drawn out gameplay sections. Act 1 would also have these longer gameplay sections, but there it served as a nice break from all of the story and character introductions, while also getting you used to all the gameplay systems. But when we're already in a slower paced chapter in this stage of the story, right after all those highs from before, these long stretches of gameplay don't really do it for me. I always just wanted the story to keep moving, but here I am, going from A to B to C, talking to some NPCs who will tell me to go to another place or fight some enemies, while I'm trying to find my way to get to the next titan more ordained. I have a couple of hours in my recordings that are just long stretches of nothing. I'm not saying that I don't want gameplay, it is a video game after all, but if the story is already going at a slower pace, I would like for the gameplay to be a bit more interesting or involved. On my first playthrough I didn't mind this. I was technically just going from A to B, but we were visiting new places, chipping away at the affinity chart, trying to pass the field skills to see a heart-to-heart, but on the second playthrough the world felt empty, similarly to how Xenoblade 1 felt to me on my first playthrough of that game. I felt like a lot of the time I was just walking from point to point, and that's when I started to notice that a lot of the Xenoblade world design feels very reliant on both that progression and a sense of wonder. Which works, because the world is beautiful and on the first playthrough you are busy building your party. But when you already know what lies ahead, when you don't need to progress your characters, the world doesn't feel very engaging and honestly became quite boring. It's interesting because obviously the game isn't trying to be your standard open world game, but it is kinda sad that the world simply didn't feel worth interacting with because I didn't need to build my party anymore. I also can't really think of any other games where I had this feeling, despite me replaying games pretty regularly. And because this world is so enormous and open, you end up running around these fields a lot, thinking about what the actual content offers, which isn't much more than a means to progress your character. Outside of the Blade quests, they're not really trying to tell any worthwhile stories in this world with the other side content. There's nothing inherently wrong with this, by the way. There are probably a lot of people that really enjoy the structure. Hell, I really enjoyed it on my first playthrough. But now on my replay, this did make me reflect on these Xenobladisms, or this design philosophy, I guess I should say. But to get back to the point that I was trying to make, when you have this chapter with long gameplay stretches where you are just traveling in an already slower stage of the story, it feels like the pacing just comes to a halt. But thankfully, when the story starts moving again, or when things are actually happening, it is pretty great. As soon as we finally arrive at our next main location, there are a bunch of little character moments already, with Tora and Rex, or the hot spring scene a few minutes later. And no, I don't just like it because they're in a hot spring and because Mythra talks about not having showered for ages. You freaks. I like this scene because it's just my gang getting some quality time. I love these characters, so you can just put them in a room and have them talk about whatever and I will have a good time. And the game actually handles these moments perfectly, as they are also packed with meaning and serve their role of not only fleshing out these characters, but also foreshadowing some stuff with Nia, for example. Mythra also basically just joined the party. I mean, in real time it has been a few hours of gameplay already, but as I was saying, not really anything happens during those hours. In terms of story progression, her awakening was extremely recent, so having these moments now between her and the gang are not only great at establishing her place in the group, but also her character in regards to Pyra. As you know, I used to be completely clueless about her existence, so getting this time to learn about her was really interesting to me. Quick side note, now that I'm talking about the girls though, I really like how Pyra and Mythra's design complements each other. They're both parts of the same being, so while their clothing might be very revealing, I do like how it's designed very purposefully. Where Mythra has open shoulders and sleeved arms, Pyra is the opposite, with covered shoulders and bare arms. The same goes for their chest and legs, showing that they are literally two halves that complete each other. I also really like the personality contrast, where Pyra is very kind-hearted and gentle, Mythra is more outspoken and short-tempered, even if they both care very much for their newfound friends. I was kinda trash-talking Pyra's design at the start of the video, so I wanted to make up for that here. This chapter might have been weirdly paced, with basically nothing happening in the first half, but the second half is genuinely great. The focus here is on Poppy and Tora, who are finding out more about their past and their family. Compared to the previous chapters, this is still lower stakes, the villain is literally Bana, again. But this is a great way to slow us down and move the focus to our characters. We even have Zeke show up again on the way to the final dungeon. Still not too much to say about him, it's just more shenanigans, but let him cook. He's really cool, guys, trust me. You already know that I really like TORNA and Poppy as well, so I really enjoyed what went down here. There's some stupid stuff too, basically everything with Bana, but Poppy was carrying this chapter so hard. It might be pretty cliche, but I loved her whole showdown with Leela. With Lila being stronger in terms of raw technology, but Poppy can still win thanks to her determination to be a real blade, achieving victory against all odds. And in the same way that Rex once inspired them, TORNA and Poppy are now inspiring Lila to fight back against her programming, which ends in her giving up her life in order to upgrade Poppy into Poppy QT, with all of this coming together as they defeat Bana. Quick side note, because this is the only time I'm gonna mention Poppy's upgrades, I really love that her naming scheme is just Poppy, Poppy Cutie, and Poppy Cutie Pie. It's adorable. At the end of the chapter, we also get TORNA showing up once again for a rematch. We team up with Morag and Bridget, use both Pyra and Mithra, but despite that, this is still not a clean victory. In our last encounter, we lost Vandam, and the only reason that we got out of this one without major losses is because Fan... I actually don't know how to pronounce this. Fun. Okay, I can do that. In our last encounter, we lost Vandam, and the only reason we got out of this one without major losses is because Fan just kinda spawned in. But Morag clues us in that she is the goddess of the Praetorium, the place where all, or most, blades and drivers are managed and registered. Apparently, the Praetor, Amaltus, wants to see us. You know, the guy who climbed the World Tree. This felt really suspicious with him being the driver of Mallows, but we don't have much of a choice. Which brings us to chapter 5, and this chapter is very similar to the previous one in terms of my issues with it, but also with what I enjoyed about it. There is some incredible character work here, especially for Rex and Pyra as we're making a quick stop at his hometown. But while there is some great stuff here, not that much happens. There was a lot of my playtime that was actually pretty boring, walking from A to B without much going on, and that really stood out to me in my replay. It's only when we arrive at those locations that the game locks in and gives us some fantastic character stuff. This area is very pretty though, and it was really fun on my first run. I just don't really enjoy these big gameplay breaks during the already slower chapters when the world isn't that engaging in its design. But since I already explained that, let's focus on the stuff that I loved here. As soon as we enter the village, the game wastes no time to dive deeper into Rex's character, which shows us that he is actually a pretty tragic character. From the opening chapters, we already knew that he wasn't exactly well off, but hearing him and the people of his village talk about how he lost his family and home at a young age did really emphasize how strong he is as a person. Because in spite of what happened to him, in spite of everything that he lost, he chose to remain hopeful. And as Pyra learns of this history, we start to see her true feelings too. She is the Aegis Blade, a weapon. The reason that many people, like Rex, have to live through these hardships. She feels extremely guilty to be a part of this world's cycle of destruction. Does she really deserve to be standing next to Rex? Does she even have a place in this world? Pyra is the person who has been the closest to us on our entire journey, and it feels like only now we get a true glimpse of her inner feelings. It was also incredibly heartfelt, and these moments all really hit me, building on everything that we've seen before, and on my replay it hits even harder because I know what this is building up to. But now that we had those moments, it's time to continue our journey, and after some more walking from A to B, we run into the Zeke nature again. We get some more shenanigans, but this time we also get something real from them. Since Morag is with us this time, she reveals that he is actually the Prince of Tantal. And not only that, he is acting as an envoy of the Praetor right now. So he temporarily joins the party as we're on our way to the Praetorium anyway right now. It is actually kind of interesting how, in the first act of the game, we always get new party members that were joining our party for good. Tora, Poppy, Nia, all of them opened up to us and joined our party definitively to reach Elysium together. But in the second act, we got Zeke, Pandora, Victoria, Morag, and Bridget, who just kind of tag along because it's convenient or because they have another objective that gives them a reason to stick with us for now. And I really like that because it makes them feel a lot more grounded, especially since our newest additions are also adults. They are a lot more mature. They already have their roles in life. It's only after spending more time with Rex that they want to fight for something more. So all of that is for later. Right now, we are finally getting to meet this Amaltus guy, and we immediately get some really interesting dialogue about his attempt to reach Elysium, but also with his views on the world, confronting us with how bleak it all really is, in this world where humanity is forced to live on these titans, who are just floating around or walking around in this cloud sea of nothingness. The game shows us all the refugees that are living here because of their titans dying, but also because the whole world is constantly at the brink of a war, which is a fantastic scene to fully introduce the Praetorium. And I also really love the visual presentation of this entire location. Down below we have the refugee camps, all thrown together in a messy and chaotic manner, creating a very oppressive atmosphere. But they are living right beneath the path that leads to the plaza where Amaltus himself lives, a place that shows no sign of the refugees as he lives in these great halls and peaceful gardens. It's a very striking contrast that immediately shows what type of person he really is, despite his attempt at putting on appearances. And in between all of this lore and world building that we get here, the game once again also feels the need to flex its characters. Be it a slower world building chapter or an action-packed one, Xenoblade 2 always makes sure that you're growing closer to its cast. On my replay, I already knew all of the information from the Amaltus conversations, so I wasn't exactly glued to my screen for them. It was actually kind of boring if I'm being completely honest, because of the way that it was presented in just one big lore dump. But I was so locked in as soon as Pyra and Bridget started talking about their forgotten time together, expanding on the idea of blades losing their memories and with that their sense of self, constantly being reborn as essentially a different person, even if they carry the same name and looks. I also really like that Bridget is the one to expand on this, because we don't know that much about her, talking about the fact that she has a journal with written records of who she used to be, and how she tries to carry on the meaning of those memories through her reincarnations, also using that to reconnect with Pyra and Mithra since they share a history together. Another scene that really stood out to me here was when Pyra was telling Rex about how he reminded Mithra of Adam. Rex having this parallel to Adam was something that has been set up for quite a while now, and I was always really interested in this, especially because at this point in the game Adam is a complete mystery. We only get glimpses of him. All we know is that he was a kind-hearted hero, inspiring the people around him, carrying the Aegis blade just like Rex is doing today. And even on my replay, after having met Adam in the DLC, after having that mystery removed, it actually really surprised me how well these scenes held up. It became entertaining in a completely different way, as we are now starting to look at them in the same way that Mithra does. To take a little break from all of this lore and world building though, we have the grand finale to chapter 5 taking place here, and you guessed it, TORNA shows up once again. It's kinda funny that whenever the game gets a little slow, they just throw TORNA in there. And as per usual with the chapter finales, this one is also fantastic, as we finally get a closer look at Jin's motivation and ideologies. This entire scene is honestly 10 out of 10, and it's also very purposeful that it takes place here. We just got that scene where Bridget talks about recording her past and finding meaning in it, but here we get a direct parallel with Jin talking about his views on memories. Memories are what makes you who you are. It's what allows life to change and evolve and grow over time, but since blades are lacking those memories, they are doomed to stay stagnant, with humanity not having that drawback, constantly evolving and taking advantage of the blades, taking away their opportunity to grow and build their own culture. Blades are forced to be slaves thanks to the way that this world works, and thus Jin rejects the world itself. Once again, our party takes a big loss in this encounter, as Jin manages to take out Fan before escaping. After all this time, we still can't gain the upper hand in any of our encounters. And as if that wasn't enough, this situation also escalated all of the political tension between the nations. I don't want to delve into the political stuff too much, as I feel like that will just end up in hours of me reciting the story with little personal input, but it is pretty interesting. This entire world lives on these dying titans, so you can already imagine how much tension there would be with humanity constantly having to relocate and having to find new resources in order to survive, let alone the fact that the Aegis suddenly returned with TORNA causing chaos everywhere. And this kicks off chapter 6. The start here is still a bit slow, but chapter 5 had an incredible finale with one of the best moments in the entire game, so I get why they would once again have to slow down a little bit to focus on the aftermath of that situation. But for some reason, chapter 6 goes from that into a freaking Bana section. This shit is genuinely just so ass and absolutely kills the pacing of this already slower act in the game, on both of my playthroughs. The only thing of note that happens here is Niall, Morag's cousin and Emperor of Mor Ordain, getting attacked, with Nia having to revive him, confirming my suspicion that she is in fact a blade, something that the hot spring scene from earlier hinted at, but she's still keeping it a secret from the rest of the gang. This one moment and the aftermath of it is very important for Morag's character though. Throughout the game she's been very quiet and collected, keeping herself more in the background, which is why I haven't talked about her that much compared to the rest of the party, but she fits the group really well, both because of Bridget and Bridget's connection to Mithra, but also because of Morag's connection to the political side of things through her cousin. And this moment is where she officially joins the gang. Over the course of the game, she's been seeing our way of life, which was so far removed from her life of serving the Empire. She's always very proud to serve and fight for them, but she never spent a lot of time living for herself, with this journey allowing her to open up to that and find her purpose beyond the Empire. That's the only good scene in this entire section though, and I do not understand why they brought Bana back for it. The opening of chapter 6 leads directly into the later parts of it, but for some reason they just threw this somehow Bana return section in the middle of it. They could have easily reached this point with Nia and Morag and Niall somewhere else, but I digress. After we deal with him, our party finally arrives in Tantal, where we get this very cute Nia and Pyra scene, which is extremely vital for me to mention because it warms my heart. But as soon as we properly arrive, we get arrested. Turns out that Tantal wants to destroy the Aegis plate and stop anyone from reaching the World Tree, so they lock us up while they prepare for Pyra's execution. There is a lot going on here, and I really love how the game uses all of it to expand on Zeke's character, because well, Zeke is Zeke. He's always been a big goofball for most of the story, and while I already loved him for that, he was genuinely one of my favorite characters just because of how entertaining he was, but this is where he becomes so much more, focusing on his more serious sides to show that he is actually a very down-to-earth guy with a strong sense of justice. He always disagreed with his father's rule of Tantal and was eventually exiled because of it, leading to him working for Amalthus and eventually meeting our gang. He was also always brought up on the belief that his family carried Adam's bloodline, which is why they became the rulers of Tantal. But now it turns out that all of that was a lie, told by his ancestors so they could rise to power. There's a scene in this chapter where he is processing all of this new information, together with Pandoria, reflecting on their life so far, their recent journey with our party, and it is easily my highlight of this part of the chapter, because this is where Zeke decides to fight back, talking about how Rex inspired him. He might be a little too pure and kind-hearted for his own good, but then that's where Zeke will step in to guide him. I love this about our party. It's not just about how Rex inspired them or how they are inspiring each other and the people around them, but it is a group where everyone's strengths complement each other perfectly. Even on the smaller scale between specific blades and drivers, like in this very scene, we see how Zeke hesitates hesitates for a bit because he's going up against his father, but Pandora immediately knows how to get him fired up again. They complement each other perfectly. All of this leads to a lot of chaos though. Our party joins up again and reaches the king. We save Pyra, but Tantal's energy core gets damaged during all this, because the king had the brilliant idea to use this energy core to fuel his giant anti-Aegis cannon that he just had laying around, causing the Titan to start sinking, and now our party has to go fix it. Enter the final big gameplay stretch of this chapter, where we need to set out to the lower levels of Tantal to find the core and stabilize it. And this gameplay stretch wouldn't have really bothered me if it wasn't for the terrible navigation system. I talked about it before, but the quest marker here felt like it was literally pointing in the wrong direction. I was genuinely lost for a while on both playthroughs because it just kept pointing directly underneath me. Like, I guess I was supposed to go down below then, but how the fuck would I even get there? The only way that I found out where to go was to jump off a cliff, and during the fall I could spot a path leading down to the objective. And during the fall I also remembered that I did this exact same thing on my first playthrough. So, kind of embarrassing, but during editing I just realized that Zeke actually tells you where to go in this section. But because I always stopped playing right after the confrontation with the king and then continued the other day, I just kind of completely forgot about this. So, I guess my apologies to this section of Xenoblade Chronicles 2. I judged you a bit unfairly there, but then again, I feel like this is also information that should have probably been in the quest log, or, you know, the objective marker could have actually pointed me towards the start of the path instead of the end of it. I feel like that's kind of why an objective marker is there. But yeah, partly stupid on my side, partly stupid on the game side. We'll leave it at that. The reason that this gameplay stretch didn't really bother me though, while the other ones did, was because the story encourages you to make it to your objective as soon as possible, and the path to the objective was also pretty engaging. Rather than just having you run from A to B across an open field, it was more structured like a dungeon. Plus, it also has one of my favorite OSTs in the game. Now, for these last two chapters, I feel like I might be getting pretty critical in an annoying way, so let me just conclude this recurring point of criticism now that we are approaching the end of Act 2. I was often calling these chapters weirdly paced or even boring, but it still holds value that on my first playthrough I was really into it. You're on this journey to unknown locations, meeting new characters, building your party, experimenting with the gameplay. But on a replay, this didn't really hold up. The game falls into a very rigid structure where you have these highlights, the meat of the chapter, but the parts connecting those have nothing interesting going on. These stretches of gameplay are necessary because you are traveling the world, it's to convey this feeling of a journey, but I wish the world itself and the content within it would be more engaging. Replaying it and recording my footage also made it very clear that this is not just me being delusional. I recorded every single play session, and while writing the script I kept having to scrub through so much footage where nothing happened. Even when doing a side quest, it would usually just be, oh, go from A to B, kill some enemies, and then go back to A. The whole purpose of it is just to give you an objective while building your party. Again, the Blade quests are an exception to that, but I already talked about the hurdle with those earlier in the video. You could argue that this is not a flaw of the game. Nobody told me to replay it, and I was undeniably invested in my first run. Which is fair, but the opening chapters never felt dull on either playthrough, and the same goes for the later chapters. So looking at that does tell me that the middle act has some pacing issues. And so we reach the finale of chapter 6 and the grand conclusion to Act 2. From here on out, the game just steps on the gas and never lets go. This all kicks off when, you guessed it, Torna shows up, leading to our biggest loss yet. The fight starts off with us fighting the 3 rookies of TORNA, who I haven't really talked about yet, thinking about it. That's mostly just because I don't really care about them that much. Like, don't get me wrong, they serve their role, they have really cool designs made by Tetsuya Nomura once again, so they often remind me of the World Ends With You and Kingdom Hearts characters, and they are cool. It's mostly just that nothing about them really stood out to me enough for me to, like, dedicate a section of the script to them, but I can't really ignore them forever, so I thought I'd mention them here. But then Jin shows up, and he is going all out this time, literally moving at the speed of light. Our party is completely defeated. The only reason that they make it out alive of this encounter is because of Pyra and Mithra's sacrifice. Allowing themselves they get captured so the rest of us wouldn't get killed. We've been losing to TORNA at basically every single opportunity, and now we even lost Pyra and Mithra. Despite always having the best of intentions, in the end Jin is right. Rex was always so focused on reaching Elysium that he did not see Pyra and Mithra's pain, with this realization resulting in him completely losing his way, right when everyone needed him most. This is where we start Act 3, as Rex, our beacon of hope, has dimmed for the first time. And this really affects the rest of the party. As Poppy puts it, Rex was always their bullseye to aim for. He was their light when they had lost hope. So what did they do without him? Well, that just means that now it's their turn to make Rex see that light again. All of them get this moment to confront Rex, to confront their inner struggles through him, and remind him and themselves of why they are here. I also really love how the more emotionally mature characters with Morag and Zeke are taking a back seat for this. They know that everyone has these pent up emotions and they simply need to let them out. This situation has hurt all of them, and seeing them get into this messy clash of emotions is where the character building of this game really paid off. All of their words have so much weight to them thanks to the moments that brought us here. Moments like this make our characters feel grounded and human. Sometimes things get messy, sometimes people get into an argument, but it's from those experiences that they ultimately grow closer together and grow as individuals. Eventually their argument is cut short, however, as we must meet with the King of Tantal. The events of this chapter made him realize his flaws too, so he wants to help the party by telling us where the true sword of the Aegis lies. And so our party sets out once more, with their newly found motivation, a deeper understanding of themselves and the people standing by their side, and with a new goal to save their dear friends, Pyra and Mithra. As we're departing, we also get this really small but incredible moment where the king asks Zeke to stand by Rex's side and protect him, because within that boy he too saw a light that must never fade. I just love moments like this, where Rex is truly framed as a beacon of hope in humanity's darkest moments. We've been getting scenes like this sprinkled throughout the whole game, and they really stood out to me, especially on my replay. The chapter continues with our characters going through this dungeon to find the one and the only Xenoblade. And this is also where we get some really nice scenes of Zeke and Pandoria opening up even further to our party, sharing the story of Zeke's banishment, how Amalthus saved him, and how he became a blade eater. But my favorite detail about this is that from now on we can actually see Pandoria's eyes through her glasses. Before they were always foggy, obscuring her eyes, but now they're clear. The eyes are the windows to the soul after all, so after everyone learns about their backstory, they have nothing to hide anymore. I said it before and I'll say it once again. Zeke and Pandoria are incredible. I adore them so much. But eventually we reach the end of this dungeon, and what awaits us is this fight against Adam's phantasms who were guarding his blade. And holy fuck, this fight sucks. I didn't struggle here on the first playthrough. I think I got lucky because I got through it pretty quickly, but now I'm washed, I guess, because this took me an embarrassing amount of time. The fight honestly isn't even that hard, but it's one of those gimmick bosses where you need to defeat every single enemy at once. So you're just chipping away at all of their health bars until you can do one big AoE to finish them off. But that gets really annoying because the enemies just kept duplicating, and then whenever I did the attack, I would miss like 1 or 2 of them, causing me to build it up again. But the longer I took, the more enemies would spawn in. This was just really annoying. Thankfully though, this fight is followed up by another one of my favorite scenes in the game. Even in the cutscenes here, our characters are really struggling. But right as we were about to lose, Nia thinks back on our journey and decides that she's done hiding, taking the step to transform into her absolutely beautiful blade form in front of everyone, casting her doubts aside and showing them that she is in fact a blade, or as TORNA says it, the bladiest blade, whatever that means. And while emotions are high, she also bears her deepest feelings for Rex, opening up about her love for him. And Rex, as the pure and innocent boy he is, famously responds with,
Rex.
俺も大好きだ。ニア。ニアのことも、みんなのことも。だから、もう絶対に立ち止まらない。
Also, yes, I am using the Japanese voices even in this video because you cannot tell me that their performances aren't perfect. But this scene already had me in tears, and Rex's reply just made me scream. Of course that is what he would say. Bro is literally too pure for this world. It is so incredibly wholesome, he loves his friends so much, and seeing them all fight together with this incredible music after all they've been through is just the best. This is also where Adam himself speaks to Rex, because this moment unfolding here proved to him that Rex is ready to wield the true blade of the Aegis. I mean, how could he not be ready? In a world where many people use blades as tools or even as slaves, you have Nia, a blade, hiding among humanity because she was afraid of what they would do to her if she showed her true form. But because of her bond with everyone here, because of her bond with Rex, she feels comfortable to reveal her true self. And her friends are right there to accept her for who she is without a second thought. And Rex tells her that he loves her, just like he loves all of his friends. Despite their past, despite who they might be, despite being a human or blade, they belong together. They fight together. They are not here to recover a weapon, but to save the ones they love, so they can achieve their dream of an impossible future together. A moment like this could have honestly been the ending of a chapter, but no, despite being at dangerous levels of peak, they're not done cooking yet, as there is yet another TORNA encounter waiting for us, this time with Malos using Monado moves, which threw me for a loop at first, and I'm honestly still not sure what's up with that. I guess it's because he's a core processor, but then I don't know why Pyra and Mithra don't use them. I don't know. I don't have much to say about this specific encounter though. It's nice that Nia gets her moment to confront him right after her self-acceptance moment, but this fight is very much the prelude to the big battle coming up next. But for some reason I always get lost on my way there. I don't know why, but on both playthroughs I got stuck in front of this door. I may be stupid. This encounter is against both Jin and Malos, and even if it doesn't end perfectly, I would count this as our first victory. We're all here to save Pyra and Mithra, but to be able to do that, they also need to be willing to accept our help. As we've seen throughout the game, they feel like the world would be a better place without them. The whole reason that they wanted to reach Elysium was so they could ask their creator to destroy them. But Rex is here now to face who they are, to accept them. They might be a weapon, but they deserve to be loved. They're part of this family and he wants to stand by them as they reach Elysium and, most importantly, whatever lies beyond. With this incredibly powerful moment resulting in Pyra and Mithra accepting his help and combining their powers into a single being, giving them a big power boost, and Rex even gets a new outfit from it. This moment works so well because it's not just them that found their peace here. It's in the same chapter where Nia finally accepted her true self. It's where Zeke and Pandora opened up completely to tell their story. It's the journey of our characters, all of the little moments along the way, their previous encounters, the lessons that they learned from them. It all led to this. So it's extremely satisfying that this is where we gain the upper hand for the very first time, and we get rewarded by learning even more about why TORNA is doing what they're doing. We knew that they wanted to erase humanity, but here Malos tells us that he wants to end everything. Humanity, the world, and the Architect, because he believes that the Architect created the Aegis Blades to bring about the end. Obviously, our party disagrees, but ultimately we won't know what the Architect was thinking until we meet him, so the only way to find out is to reach Elysium. Malos is kind of a dick though, so he pushed us off this platform first so he can have a head start in the climb. Classic Malos, I guess. This is the start of a very long dungeon, starting in chapter 8, and I would say that it goes all the way until the end of the game. And something that immediately stood out to me once we were pushed down here was the environment surrounding us. For the very first time, we are underneath the Cloud Sea, and all we can see are skyscrapers, remnants of an old civilization much like ours, something that the game kind of just drops on us and won't explain for quite a while. I really love how this was done, and the explanation behind it made me love it even more. But that's for later, because before we start our climb, we get an explanation about the Pyra and Mithra fusion. The game explains it as coffee with milk, and honestly, that's probably the best explanation we could have hoped for. I'm honestly really happy that they didn't overcomplicate it. Their fusion is called Pneuma. Yet another name that I do not know how to pronounce, but I will try my best. In any case, keep that name in mind. They do ask you what name you want to call her in this form despite that though, and I just picked Mithra. I really love both of them, and yeah, Pyra is the first one we met on our journey, but Mithra was her original form, so it felt more fitting for me personally. This part of the game is absolutely stacked though. Not even 5 minutes after this conversation, Jin joins our party. Turns out that when Malos pushed us down, he kinda went overboard and Jin ended up falling down too. He probably could have saved himself, but he looked kind of out of it. For now, he's joining us though. We're calling it a truce until we reach the World Tree, and his presence makes for a really interesting conversation between him and Bridget later on, where she asks him about her old self. We got a few scenes already about her journals of her previous lives, but here we get a deeper glimpse at that, showing that even with this book, she isn't 100% sure if whatever is written is even true. It's tragic that she wants so badly to remember these people who meant so much to her, but she can't. No matter how much she tries to carry on their legacy, no matter how much she tries to be the best version of herself, she doesn't know if this is actually in line with what the previous versions of her or the people that she used to know would have wanted. And right after this, there's also a Poppy scene, which is actually one of my favorite scenes in the game. I feel like I'm saying that a lot in this part of the video, but it's just peak, guys. I don't know what to tell you. Looking over the ruins of this city, she talks to Mithra about how humanity always pushes technology to advance further and further until it ultimately becomes their downfall. And with Poppy being one of the most advanced pieces of technology out there, she's scared that she will one day become a source of destruction, terrified that she could bring pain to those she loves. A fear that Mithra can very much relate to, causing them to share this really nice moment as they promise to make sure something like that would never happen again. This scene was so incredibly sweet, and it really touched me because Poppy is like 5 seconds old. She should not be worrying about any of this stuff. Between all of her goofy scenes, moments like this really tell us a lot about her character and her relationship with Tora. Poppy, you are my absolute goat. They could never make me hate you, no matter how many blushy crushies and silly emotes they throw at us. From here, we continue venturing through the broken city ruins on the way made to the base of the World Tree. And eventually, Jin opens up to us to reveal more of his backstory. I haven't really mentioned this before, but in between a lot of the chapters, we would often get scenes of Jin looking at this frozen body of a girl. And here is where all of that starts to make sense. Jin was a blade alive in the time of TORNA, the Golden Country, and his driver back then was this girl named Laura. But she was sadly one of the many victims of the Aegis War, and because she was his driver, upon her death, Jin would automatically revert to a crystal and forget everything about their life together. But since he couldn't just watch her die, he ate Laura's heart to keep her alive inside of him, becoming a flesh eater and being left to wander the world alone, without purpose, keeping her body frozen in ice as a grim reminder. But what makes this even worse is that it wasn't the war itself that killed Laura, it was Amalthus. So yeah, big twist I guess, this guy is evil. Can't say I was too surprised though, they were hinting at it pretty heavily, but Jin goes on to reveal that Amalthus went around to kill every survivor of TORNA in the aftermath of the war. Or at least he tried to. In TORNA, people and blades were living in harmony, but he could not stand this. Because from his earliest memories, Amalthus has always witnessed mankind at its lowest. He lived through war, he lost his parents, he tried to save people who in turn used the life given to them to end the life of another. He was disgusted by the cruelty within humanity, and disgusted in the world itself, which drove them to commit these acts. All of this eventually leading him to climbing the World Tree in the hopes of meeting the architect. And we know how it goes from there, with this disgust originally leading to him destroying TORNA, and now it comes to a head in the finale of chapter 8. Our party reached the World Tree, we split up from Jin again, but we have started our climb. We reach above the Cloud Sea, and what greets us there is Amalthus. Breaking his facade, he starts his assault on the World Tree, starting a war and another attempt at reaching the architect himself. As you can already see, there is a lot going on in these chapters, a lot of things are finally being revealed and all of it was done incredibly well. Both narratively and thematically, everything is starting to fall into place. We've been in this dungeon for a while now, and to be honest, the game was kind of kicking my ass at a lot of points here. There are some really challenging bits, and a lot of super strong enemies that will aggro on you all at once from pretty far away, causing me to try this pretty tedious strategy of luring them out one by throwing rocks at them. Let me tell you, I spent quite a while in this dungeon, but visually it was an absolute treat. I loved the contrast between the interior and the exterior of the World Tree. Inside it's quiet, mechanical, futuristic, but at points we visit the outside, where we are met with a more natural environment, but also the absolute chaos of an all-out war. Reaching the top of the World Tree is also no small feat, so as we're progressing through the dungeon, we're also getting a bunch of really small scenes where the characters just talk about their journey so far, their thoughts on the recent reveals, their expectations now that they're so close to meeting the architect. It's just a really nice way to break up the dungeon gameplay and to show us how far we've truly come. We even get this incredible scene here with Mikhail, one of the younger TORNA members, with him shielding our party from one of Amalthus's attacks. Because even if Mikhail is a part of TORNA, even if he supports their goal of destroying this world, our party reminds him of a better time. A time where he also had people he loved. It's true that I personally didn't care too much for him throughout the game, but this was a fantastic send-off, especially on my replay after I played through the TORNA expansion, which added a lot more weight to this moment. And it's thanks to him that we can now have our final confrontation with Jin. Malos already went ahead, but Jin is awaiting us here, at the final elevator, where Malos has always been fully set on his course for destruction. When they met, Jin was simply a man who had lost everything. Not even a man, he was a blade, a tool to be used by humanity until he literally had to become the ground for them to walk on. But it was when he was at his lowest that Malos reached out his hand and offered him a purpose: to kill the architect and bring about the end. Accepting his offer, they promise to fulfill that goal together, but throughout the game we start to see how Rex is directly challenging his views, especially in the later chapters. There are people out there like Rex who see blades as equals, people like Laura, like Adam. So was this really the right path? Is this what Laura would have wanted? In these final moments, Jin stops. Maybe he doesn't realize it yet, but Rex's light is starting to reach him. He declares that he wants to see what outcome the world would choose between Rex's hope and Malos' destruction, but even then, he still fights us, for that is what he promised to his one true friend. And the following encounter between him and our party is honestly flawless. It is not a clash of swords, but a clash of ideals. Rex wants to open up Elysium for humanity, but Jin journeyed through the ruins of the old world. He witnessed the destruction of Torna, the Golden Country, and outside there is yet another war raging on. A war started by humanity, so he doesn't understand. Humanity enslaved his people, they're currently destroying the world, so why allow them to step foot into Elysium? But Rex believes that the purpose of a blade isn't to be their slave, it's to keep humanity in check and to prevent all of these things from happening. And even after he's gone, Rex's views will be carried on. There will be someone else, just like there was Adam before him. And this is where Jin's weapon gets knocked out of his hands, because he is starting to realize that the same counts for blades. They might lose their memories when they're reborn, but during their lifetime they also leave their impact. They pass on their ideals and memories to the ones they surround themselves with. Even all those years ago, where he lost himself, where he lost his purpose, he also sought connection. And he found it in Malos and the rest of Torna. And Jin also recognizes that even though Bridget was reborn, this new Bridget is also really similar to the one he used to know. Jin always saw their life cycle as unfair, but Rex sees it as something beautiful. Blades live life, they share their experiences with others, give life to new blades, and eventually they become the very grounds that allows for future generations to live. Rex wants to ask the architect why he created these beautiful people, not because he doesn't know, but because he wants to make sure their answers match. And it's this beautiful outlook on the world that definitively breaks through to Jin and shows him a new perspective. That is my boy right there. But right as things are starting to look up, Amalthus enters the room, and at this point he is completely lost it. He truly believes that it is his role to cleanse this world, a purpose given to him by the architect himself, which is where the villains of this game gets truly fascinating to me. A lot of people criticize this story for being extremely surface level. Rex is just a good guy who is very good and naively optimistic, and Malos and Amalthus are just evil because they want to destroy the world. And as I've hopefully been able to portray across this video, both of those statements are wrong. On the surface, sure, the villains do just look evil because of the generic "the world sucks so let's destroy it," but underneath that we find a compelling exploration of how a negative outlook on the world can only fester into a greater despair, causing one to spiral and completely lose themselves. Both Malos and Amalthus are so deep into their pessimistic outlook on life that at every single step the only thing they can do is fuel each other's hatred. Amalthus already carried the disgust for this world when he resonated with the Aegis crystal, which resulted in the crystal absorbing all of that hate and creating the Malos that we know today, who then took it upon himself to sow destruction and bring about the end in an expression of that hatred. And Amalthus, upon seeing this cruelty brought forth by a creation of the architect, not knowing that it originated from himself, is now led to believe that the architect must want for this world to be destroyed, which validates him in his own outlook on the world, with all of this eventually festering into the delusion that he was chosen to carry out the architect's will, because this core crystal, the cause of so much pain, wasn't given just to anyone. It was granted to him, losing a part of his faith, a part of himself at every step of the way, ultimately becoming the monster that stands before us now. But I also really love that during this showcase of his absolute madness, we get these flashbacks to Zeke and Amalthus's conversations, to show that he wasn't always like this. There was a part of Amalthus that genuinely wanted to do good, but it's his lack of faith, his outlook on life that only pushed him down further. It's the complete opposite of Rex, who went through similar cruelty but always tried to stay positive, always surrounding himself with the people he loved. Amalthus's pessimism only led to despair, while Rex's optimism led to hope. A hope so strong that it even reached the depths of Jin's heart, who now sacrifices himself to clear the way for our party. He was just hopelessly lost for hundreds of years and tries to do some good in the end, with his parting words being a request for Rex. Find Malos and tell him the answer you found. Enter the final chapter, which opens on a flashback to Klaus from Xenoblade 1 activating the conduit. Actually an insane way to open a chapter, because so far this game has been extremely self-contained with little to no connections to the first title, but I'm gonna talk about this when the game gives us some more context to this scene. In terms of the actual meat of the chapter, it actually starts off in a very peaceful way, with the characters reaching the top of the world tree, towering far above the world and looking out over the planet into space. On both of my playthroughs, I always took a moment here. After all of the chaos from the recent chapters, a quiet moment like this, with a view like that, does hit different. It's a perfectly crafted moment to make you reflect, take in the atmosphere and appreciate everything you've been through, appreciate the world. I especially like that they even put a heart-to-heart here, with the characters goofing around a bit, trying to spot their homes from the sky above. But we can't dilly-dally for too long. Elysium awaits. On the way there, we also get some pictures of how it always used to look in our visions, luscious grass as far as the eye could see, but when we actually get there, it turns out to be a barren wasteland, filled with nothing but the remnants of a civilization. Safe to say, definitely not what I expected, and even less so what the characters expected. But Rex is not one to give up. We haven't even seen the architect yet, so we continue forth. It is also very fitting here that our goal is to reach a church. We are visiting their literal creator after all, and the church bells were also what we heard at first when forming a pact with Pyra. But when we arrive here, we get these dark visions, with each party member talking to us about how Rex let each and every one of them down. Elysium is fake, we only have eyes for Pyra and Mithra, we only got the power of the Aegis because we're lucky. Every single character confronts us in this way, and one by one we fight them off, all on our own. Until, that is, we reach Pyra and Mithra. Unlike the rest, they're actually really nice to Rex, but he ultimately breaks down under the weight of what the rest was saying to him, which causes Pyra to call out to the architect to stop this madness. Turns out we were being shown everyone's deepest fears, their insecurities and their doubts, and this puts the previous scenes in a really interesting context, adding another layer to each and every character. Because as humans, even if we don't always want to admit it, we all have our doubts or thoughts of jealousy. We can be petty or stubborn. Throughout the game, we've seen that TORNA, for example, always looks up to Rex, but becoming a driver was a lot harder for him. He had to create his own blade, while Rex did kind of just stumble upon the Aegis, so it makes sense that TORNA feels like Rex just got lucky. We also know that Nia has romantic feelings for Rex, but even if he does love and appreciate her, he's never really shown a romantic interest. If he had an eye for anyone, the story has been kind of putting that spotlight on Pyra and Mithra, in my opinion. I'm not trying to get into shipping discourse here, but that's the feeling I had while playing the game. And because of that, it makes sense that Nia feels like Rex only has eyes for them. And the same goes for all of the other characters who harbor their own feelings of jealousy or doubt or whatever it may be in their case. Maybe they aren't even fully aware of these feelings, maybe these were just small doubts that crossed their minds before brushing them off because they obviously have no ill intention towards each other. I feel like everyone can relate to having these thoughts that you don't really want to have, but there is this little voice within you voicing them regardless. To continue from the Nia example, after her initial confession, she doesn't really voice her feelings for Rex anymore, which makes sense considering that there hasn't really been a proper time to do so. But I really like that the game is acknowledging those feelings again here. Yes, Nia is happy, she found a new home, she found people that love her, and she loves them back, but those romantic feelings are still there deep inside without a proper answer, which could lead to some sort of jealousy upon seeing Rex with Pyra and Mithra, even if she might not want to feel stuck up on those feelings, or she might not even fully understand them. Those feelings are there regardless, and those are the feelings that the architect wanted to see, so he brought them up to the surface. He is kind of a dick for that, to be honest, especially since he does this the second they step into the room, but at least he's come up with a pretty fascinating lore dump to make up for it. That lore dump being the context to the opening of this chapter, and the answer to many questions that I've had on my mind ever since the beginning of the game. And let me warn you before I continue, there will be some Xenoblade 1 spoilers ahead. I won't be going into detail as we are talking about good games here today, but the endings of the games do connect, so it's kind of unavoidable to talk about Xenoblade 1, at least in the broad strokes. But it turns out that the architect is actually a guy named Klaus. He was a researcher in a world pretty similar to ours, just think a few hundred years in the future where we have giant mechs, so I guess it might not be that similar. During his research, he finds the Conduit, an object capable of connecting us to other worlds or even to create them. This object fascinated him immensely. His partner was against using it, fearing the consequences, but Klaus didn't listen, activating this Conduit regardless, hoping that it would bring salvation, as his world was currently at war, struggling to survive, so maybe their salvation was waiting in one of these other worlds. He probably should have listened to his partner though, because the old world that we explored earlier underneath the Cloud Sea is all that is left of Klaus's original world today, and everything else was flung into a different universe, including half of Klaus's body, which now consists of a dimensional portal connecting him to that universe. And while he doesn't exactly state it, that universe is the world of Xenoblade 1. They do confirm this later on, but if you played the first game, it is extremely obvious already. This was a really cool reveal though. In my Xenoblade 1 video, I said that while I didn't care too much for the narrative as a whole, the ending was one of my highlights, and I really loved this connection. It's honestly masterfully done how this one moment of Klaus activating the Conduit is used perfectly in both games. Both renditions of this moment show a different aspect of him and serve the themes of their respective narratives. Individually, they're already incredibly strong moments, but add them together and it doesn't only flesh out his character, but also deepens our understanding of him and the world of the entire game that we just played through, which in turn strengthens both of these endings. The first game focuses on his more twisted side, his curiosity and lust for power that made him pursue this experiment, toying with the connections between and creation of worlds as if he was a god, wanting to go a step beyond being human. But here in Xenoblade 2, while it does display his god complex once more, we are also given more context and more complexity to this. After seeing humanity always pushing further and further until they are driven to the brink, Klaus simply lost hope, with his lack of faith turning into a desperation, a desire to find a solution, taking it upon himself to fix this cruel world. And upon finding the Conduit, that quickly turned into a delusion, thinking that he specifically was chosen by some divine force, because he was given this object, nobody else, and it could bring him a step closer to becoming a god himself. Sounds a bit like another guy we know, doesn't it? And all of this came together to drive Klaus to to activate the conduit, and in both games he had to deal with the aftermath of that choice. Depending on if you played the first game or not, you know what happened there, but here he was left all alone in the ruins of his old world, with nothing left but time to reflect. Over time, realizing that he was also guilty of humanity's sins, but he was also starting to understand something more important. The fact that even in those final moments, there was still some beauty left in the world. And after coming to that realization, he tries to atone for his sins by fabricating a new world from the ashes of the old, creating the Cloud Sea and life itself, creating the Blades and the Aegises, Logos and Pneuma, Pneuma being Pyra and Mithra and Logos is Malos. There was also supposed to be a third Aegis, but let's just say that he lost it for now. Every single thing that a Blade feels and experiences is being recorded by their core crystal, and that data is used to further evolve their species over generations. All done to keep humanity in check, making sure that the cruelty of the past wouldn't happen again. Turns out, Rex was right. Blades aren't tools or slaves, they only became that and remained stagnant because humanity took advantage of them. Because despite the architect's best efforts, humanity is still humanity. We all harbor fear, doubt, a need for understanding, causing our mistakes from the past to repeat. And seeing all of this unfold, seeing parts of himself within Amalthus, Klaus had once again lost faith. Perhaps humanity didn't deserve this second chance at life, so he just lets the world run its course. Until he witnessed the bond between Pyra and Rex. I guess love can bloom on the battlefield after all. Earlier, the architect already spoke to Malos, who is still set on destroying this world, and now he spoke to Rex, who wholesomely declares that he will confront Malos, beat him up, and then get a drink with him. It's the ultimate showdown between the one who lost all faith and the one who refuses to, and the answer that comes out on top will show the architect if he was right in granting life to humanity once more. But before they leave, Rex says his final words to the architect, and this is the moment where everything fell into place for me on my original playthrough.
クラウスさん、この世界のことまだ諦めてる？
今はお前たちに出会えてよかったと思っている。
そっか。なら俺の答えと同じだね。ありがとう、俺たちを産んでくれて。
Thank you for giving us life. For the duration of this entire game, Rex kept losing over and over again. He lost his parents, lived on his own with Gramps as a scavenger, took on dangerous missions just to make a little money, and even after meeting Pyra, he still lost most encounters with TORNA, losing Vandam, Fan, failing to protect Pyra and Mithra, seeing the start of yet another war. Our boy has been through a lot. And now that he's facing the creator of this world, the architect himself, not once does he complain or blame him, because Rex is truly grateful to the architect. Grateful for creating this world, for granting him and his friends life. Without him, they would have never met. He would have never met Pyra or Mithra. Rex always just keeps on keeping on to reach his goal, simply to try and make the world a better place. It's pretty cliche, it can be kind of a naive goal, but sometimes that's exactly what the universe needs. I said earlier that the game's central conflict has a lot of depth beneath the surface, but I also think that the game finds a lot of strength within that surface level simplicity. We don't always need morally grey characters to the point that we're not sure who the real villain is. Not every villain is redeemable, not every hero is bound to fall to the darkness. There is so much beauty in how Rex is just this beacon of hope, with that light helping those around him find their way, even leading him to ultimately defeat the self-proclaimed Endbringer, Malos. They might be at complete odds, but now that we're here, at the end of everything. Even Malos says that he hoped that they could have met sooner. Malos was always gonna be Malos. If he had resonated with Rex, he would have simply become another person altogether. Malos was always gonna be this being to bear a disdain for the world. But even then, he had his time on this earth. He connected with Jin and the others in TORNA, and he fought for his purpose without ever holding anything back. So maybe his life wasn't that bad after all. But ultimately, their fight ended in our victory, which also gives the Architect his answer. If that boy can defeat Malos, maybe there is still hope. At this time, we can also hear Shulk from Xenoblade 1 scream through Klaus's portal, because in that universe, Shulk is about to deliver the final blow on that version of Klaus. This time, in Japanese.
僕たちは僕たちの力で神を切り、そして未来を切り開く。
This is the only moment that I honestly wish I was playing in English, just so I could have some sort of nostalgic reaction to hearing Shulk's voice again, but it is how it is. With Japanese Shulk taking down his Klaus, our Klaus also knows that his final moments are upon him, and so he does one final act as the Architect of Alrest, sending every single Titan through a portal onto a new world, so life can persist, giving an incredible end to Klaus's character. For someone with barely any screen time, it's kind of crazy how he has such an impactful role, and it actually works incredibly well. We saw his mistakes, but we also saw his regrets and his attempts at redemption through creating Alrest. And even if he lost faith once more, thanks to Rex he can make his final action one to be proud of. But our party still has to escape from the World Tree in order to join the rest on this trip to a new world. And with everything around them falling apart, Pyra and Mithra ultimately have to sacrifice themselves in order to save the others. In the moment that absolutely breaks Rex and me. They always said that they wanted to come to Elysium to die, so in that way they are simply doing what they came here to do. But now it's different. At the time they had given up, but thanks to their journey, thanks to Rex, they regained meaning and found love. After all of these years, they're finally grateful to be alive, grateful to the Architect for creating them, and now the only way out is to use that life in order to save those who mean everything to them. It might be unfair, it might be heartbreaking. You know what? It is heartbreaking. I was holding the controller sobbing, but it is the only way. So in this time of need, the rest of the party picks up Rex and they make their escape together, entering a new world for all of our characters to live, a new world for humanity. We see all of the Titans that we visited on our journey make their way here too, but in this world there is no Cloud Sea, with all of the Titans instead making landfall. We can even see these crystals raining down on the new world, in the same way that we saw them in the Architect lore dump. They don't really go into detail on this, the game actually doesn't tell us anything about this world. I'm guessing we'll find out more in Xenoblade 3, but for now a lot of this, basically all of it, is up for interpretation, and I really love that. I don't need to know anything about this world. If there was no Xenoblade 3, or if that game doesn't expand on this topic at all, I would be completely fine with it, and I could tell you why. But I think Rex puts it best, because as he sees this new world before him, he declares that Elysium was here all along. Elysium isn't some sort of literal paradise where humanity can live happily ever after. Elysium is where he can be with the people he loves, with his family. They were only able to reach this place thanks to everyone that they met on this journey, thanks to Pyra and Mithra. And so he holds their lifeless core crystal in his hands as they fly off into the distance. Elysium is right here. Credits roll, and I am bawling my eyes out. What a masterpiece. But as I am doing that, we fade back into the game. One of the falling crystals hits the Numagor, and after a blinding light, we see them. No longer sharing the same body, in front of us are Pyra and Mithra. Even if they were willing to sacrifice themselves, and even if it was very poetic how they fulfilled their original goal by dying, despite the reasoning being the exact opposite, I think it's beautiful that they're here now, so they can finally live without worrying about the reason for their creation. They can just live. Our party is complete once again, ready to create a new world, ready to make new memories, ready to embrace life. Wait, you guys thought this video was over just because we reached credits? Around a year after the release of the base game of Xenoblade Chronicles 2, they actually released a DLC, which got this really cool physical edition. I always like it when games do that. That's besides the point though. This is TORNA, the Golden Country, a prequel DLC taking place hundreds of years before the base game. At first I wasn't sure if I should include it in this video or not, but fuck it, let's just discuss it while we're here, because despite TORNA being 20 to 30 hours long, I don't actually have that much to say about it. In this expansion you play as Laura, and of course her blade Jin. Throughout the story we form a party with Adam, Mithra and Bridget with their driver at the time, Hugo. There are obviously a bunch of other characters that you meet, some new faces and some old, like a young Mikhail for example, and the story here is pretty good, even if I don't think it was exactly necessary. The base game already does a fantastic job at explaining the meaning that TORNA carries, while also keeping a veil of mystery around it. This is especially the case for Adam. I actually really loved that the base game never showed him. We only heard about him or saw obscured visions, which fit his character incredibly well, being this mythical hero of a bygone era. They gave us enough for the story to work with, but always kept it vague so your imagination can fill the gaps. It's true that these types of expansions can add depth, but it's often not worth it considering how much intrigue we can lose in return. But TORNA does something that not many other games are capable of. They lift the veil, showcasing TORNA and Adam, the person Mithra used to be, the relationship between Jin and Laura. We even take part in the Aegis War, but they were able to do all of this without taking away from what makes it so interesting. The characters being as good as they are is a really big part of how they were able to achieve this. Not every character is treated equally, as I didn't really care for Hugo, but I loved getting to know Adam. When you meet him, you immediately start to see direct similarities, but over the course of the DLC, they mold him into a great character in his own right. Seeing him in action was awesome, but I kind of expected this, knowing what we knew from him from the base game. What did surprise me, however, was how much I liked Laura, who is the emotional core of this narrative together with Jin. We might be dealing with grand-scale conflicts like the Aegis War, but this DLC still manages to be a story on a personal level. In terms of Jin, there's not really anything here that we didn't know already or that we couldn't figure out from the base game, but they still did a great job at expanding and building on his story. Seeing this period of his life before he lost everything was pretty impactful and added a lot to his character. Granted, he was already easily one of my favorite parts of this game, but the DLC elevated him even further. And all of this is the main strength of this expansion. In my opinion, it's not vital to the experience of Xenoblade 2, but it is a welcome addition, fleshing out characters, deepening our understanding of them, and showcasing this time period of the world. But that is sadly where my praise for this DLC ends, because despite all of the incredible things that I mentioned earlier, in the end, my experience with this DLC wasn't that great, and the biggest reason for that is the pacing. Not even the pacing of the main story itself, because if you just go from main event to main event, it's actually pretty solid. But the pacing of this entire thing is ruined by this one system called the community level. This expansion has a bunch of NPCs, and all of them have side quests, and upon completion of any of these, it will count towards your community level. This system starts off with just Jin and Laura in the middle of a big empty circle, but every single time you complete someone's side quest chain, it'll add them to this graph, and after collecting a certain amount, you gain a community level, 16 of them to advance to level 2, 32 for level 3, and so on. This is basically a progression system system to show your connection to all of the NPCs in the world of this DLC. I actually think this graph is pretty cool. It makes you feel like you're establishing your own little community, and it adds a lot of weight to all of these side quests. It definitely makes them feel a lot more important than the usual ones. These side quests are not as good as the main quests of the expansion, but they're definitely a step up from the ones from the base game, and I would say that most of them are decently enjoyable. There are some stinkers though, because I remember this one Nopon asking me to destroy 300 crates for some reason, but the annoying part of this system is the fact that these side quests aren't really optional. At certain points, the game will prevent you from progressing the main narrative until you hit a certain community level, literally blocking any and all progression, forcing you to help more random NPCs instead. And this is where this cute little system becomes the thing that actively ruins my whole experience. I do understand their thought process behind this. When you start this expansion, you already know that TORNA and everyone on it will be tragically destroyed by the time that credits roll, and that will be pretty impactful, considering that you probably care about the main gang. But this impact will be much bigger if they can get you to care for everyone. And so they force you to interact with these NPCs, they force you to get to know them, form bonds with them, just so they can rip all of them away from you. But this was not really the way of doing that, because as soon as the game started forcing me to interact with them, it immediately has the opposite effect. There were times in this expansion that I truly felt like doing side content, so I went out of my way and did some questing, growing my community. But at a certain point, I was satisfied. I felt like I put a good amount of time into the DLC, I could feel that the narrative was getting closer to a conclusion, so I was ready to continue the story and ride it out until the end. So I started focusing more on the narrative. Until the game just stopped me. Oh, you thought you were done? You thought you were satisfied? Good one, man. No, just go help out like 30 more NPCs maybe, and then we'll have a chat about continuing the story. It felt like a slap to the face, because you cannot force someone to care. At this point, I wasn't doing these side quests because I wanted to, or because I wanted to grow my community, but because I had to. The game was actively wasting my time. I was connected to my little community. I really like these guys, they're pretty chill, but I was also satisfied. And every further interaction that I was forced to have, every further connection that I was forced to make, made me like this whole community less. I literally just wanted to move on, but I couldn't, for the simple reason that now the ending of the game could be like, look, isn't it sad? All of these people are dying. These are the people that you helped and they are dead. But I was just there like, thank God this is over. I don't want to spend another minute in this fucking community. This DLC has a main narrative that's maybe 5 hours long, but it ended up taking me 20 to complete. Maybe the ratio is a bit of an exaggeration because I played this in early 2024, but I am not replaying those 20 hours to find out and to give you an accurate representation, which honestly proves my point, because Xenoblade 2, the base game, is like 60 hours, and I gladly replayed that from start to end, but I cannot be bothered to touch TORNA again. It's honestly a shame, because the core narrative of this DLC is great, but if you need me so badly to spend time with this community, why don't just work those side quests into the story itself? So it's not a 5-hour story with 15 hours of side questing, but a 15-hour narrative that dives deeper into the community aspect. Genuinely a baffling decision. I don't want to end this section on a negative note though, which is why I haven't talked about the TORNA combat system until now, because this combat is incredible. Put simply, it is built on the same foundations as the base game, but it is a lot faster. You don't need to go down specific paths for blade combos, you can just throw some elemental combos at the enemy and you'll immediately have the cores build up, you get full bursts a lot faster, and it's just a lot of fun. And considering how much shorter this expansion is, this faster paced version of the combat system fits this expansion incredibly well. The RPG mechanics like the aux cores and the core chips were also streamlined a bit to make them easier to manage, so all around some great changes on the the gameplay front. Visually, it was also really pretty. I especially loved revisiting locations from the base game, like Torigov, which were brilliantly redesigned to look completely different, but also recognizable at the same time. And lastly, I also really loved the ending. Experiencing the destruction of Torna firsthand, seeing Mithra and Malos go all out in this Aegis war, and while it is a very spectacular and bombastic conclusion, it also manages to be very emotional, because you know that none of the people involved here will ever be the same again. It hurts to see Laura be ripped away from Jin, not only because we now experience their time together, but just because you know where it will lead him, unable to move on, trapped by her final words, a life without purpose. It hurts to see Mithra fight because you know the damages that it will cause. It was all done in an incredible way. But I'm also not gonna lie, this ending would have hit a lot harder if I was able to experience this finale when I was satisfied and not 10 hours later after being forced to grind that damn community level. But all in all, even if I really despise the community stuff, I cannot deny that I appreciate TORNA for the incredible character work, the very fun combat system, and that ending. Again, I definitely don't think it's necessary to play this. All of this is already implied in the base game and it doesn't really tell us anything that we didn't know already, but that doesn't mean it's not worth playing, as it truly expands on the story, the world, and the characters of Xenoblade Chronicles 2 in a pretty meaningful way. I won't say that Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is a flawless game. It stumbles with the pacing, has a confusing combat system that it doesn't even bother to explain. I had some issues with the blade and progression systems, but despite all that, it has so much to love. And in the end, as much as I can point at specific things, a game is more than just a sum of its parts. It's the whole experience that counts. And this one has extraordinary characters that I absolutely adore, and a really strong message about positivity and love, which I really appreciate. It's a game filled to the brim with hope, to the point that it genuinely makes me sad to see how many people refuse to engage with this title just because of silly reasons like the character designs or out of context scenes. I am honestly quite baffled at the fact that liking Xenoblade 2 is even seen as a controversial thing in some circles. Revisiting this game, writing this video, really made me reflect on this whole experience, and it drove home even further how truly special it is. I mentioned the OST here and there, but there were so many times during the creation of this video that I would be searching for specific scenes or songs to include, only for me to get completely lost in this world once again. Especially near the end, whenever I stumbled across a scene using Drifting Soul, and I would just end up listening to the whole song again. I would constantly be rewatching entire scenes, soaking in the music and getting a little emotional. There's just something about this game that really hits, and I loved combing through it in this way. Some flaws, like the pacing and some gameplay mechanics, stuck out even stronger now, but I also started to appreciate many elements so much more. Even the aspects that I didn't really talk about in detail, like its commentary on racism through the way that humanity is treating blades despite them also being people, its exploration of religion with how the Indol Church controls the blades and through that gains influence on world politics, or how the game is filled with so much hope, yes, but it's specifically a hope for the future. There's a reason that Rex is just a kid, as he symbolizes the next generation. But it's mainly the more complex characters or plotlines that I grew to appreciate even more through my replay, with Jin, Malos, and Amalthus, who became some of my favorite gaming antagonists. Their cycle of pessimism, the parallel between the Architect and Amalthus, I love how all of them lost everything, and that the narrative explores how they continue from that point on. Some seek destruction, others lose themselves even further as they desperately look for a purpose, and others are simply broken and desperately cling to their past, until they meet someone to show them the way again. And it's within this dark world that we find a true beacon of positivity be like Rex. He perfectly embodies this game's message and is a perfect contrast to our villains. And this might be a stretch, but I also really like how this contrast extends to the UI and other design aspects. We might be in this dark world dealing with all of this cruelty, but there is so much beauty found within. From the gorgeous landscapes to the silly character interactions and even down to the dreamlike UI aesthetic. In some ways that can cause a disconnect, especially when a happy soundbite plays right after a dramatic cutscene or something, but in general I really love that the game has all of this brightness to it. Talking about visuals, I don't want to dwell on this for too long, but the Nintendo Switch hardware does not do this game justice in my opinion. The artists created some absolutely gorgeous environments here, some really pretty character designs, and a world of a seriously impressive scope. But it looks so crunchy, especially in handheld mode. I'm impressed by the performance, but this game looks really rough. Hello, editing Arcry here, or post-time skip Arcry, I guess. When I originally was writing this video, I had a little section here about how I was pretty sure that those concerns I just mentioned would only be there for a small time, because I was pretty confident that there would be a Nintendo Switch 2 edition for Xenoblade 2, an edition that would look absolutely stunning and just blow our minds with how good this game would look in 4K 60 FPS. But I would also talk about the fact that a Switch 2 edition would be the perfect opportunity for them to add some small tweaks to the systems that I mentioned earlier, like the affinity chart, the compass, the quest tracking, the quest menu, the field skills. Those are all things in the game that really interrupt the flow of it, but with a few very small tweaks could just elevate this entire experience. And the Nintendo Switch 2 edition, or a definitive edition, could honestly just fix all of those issues really easily. I feel like. I mean, I'm just a YouTuber, I'm not a game developer, even though I studied that. Like, I don't know what Monolith is cooking. But then, they announced it. And it might actually be out at this point, so I guess we do know what they are cooking. And what they were cooking looks fantastic. Judging by the trailers, the game in 4K 60 FPS looks jaw-droppingly beautiful. I am very excited to just boot up the game and walk through these environments and do some side quests with these new visuals. But sadly they didn't really address any of the issues that we were kind of hoping for them to address, so that is a bit disappointing, especially because this Nintendo Switch 2 edition does add some pretty substantial content. We have a whole new game mode, we have new outfits for Pyra and Mithra, and we even have a new blade, which is cool and all, but like, instead of fixing the summoning system, they're just adding more characters to the gacha pool? Like, that feels kinda backwards. But in the end, obviously, it doesn't matter that much, the game is still fantastic, it's just a bit disappointing, and I kinda wanted to mention it for the sake of completeness with this video. But that was just a little side note to the whole video, so let's get back to it. I definitely had some pretty major issues with the combat system in the early game, but it truly shaped into a very satisfying system by the time that I got the hang of it. I will say that it can be a little slow sometimes. There is a lot that goes into setting up your combos before being able to do a full burst attack, but I cannot deny that I was having a blast in basically every single encounter. Even with all of these weird and bloated systems connected to it, it never bothered me to the point that it actively took away from my enjoyment. I always loved the more challenging fights, and it was really fun to experiment with all of the different blades and find a setup that worked. The story also hooked me in the early chapters already, with some endearing characters and an interesting world. Yes, the middle act has some flaws, but on my first playthrough I was captured by the world building and the introductions to the rest of the cast. And starting at the finale of chapter 6, I don't think this game ever dips underneath a 10 out of 10. Every time that I think, oh, this moment was perfect, they can't really top this, they end up topping it, and they go beyond at every opportunity. That entire narrative stretch at the end of the game is genuinely perfect in my eyes. It is a long stretch of the game, but the pacing was airtight, the characters were handled perfectly with extremely satisfying payoffs, and all of the twists had me at the edge of my seat. But the thing that I undoubtedly love the most is this cast of characters. It genuinely can cannot be understated how much I love them. Mia, the girl who lost everything, someone who couldn't even be her true self, wandering from place to place until she found her family. The people who love her for who she is, so she could finally stop hiding. Tora, who couldn't even resonate with a core crystal, but took fate into his own hands and created Poppy, and together they did everything in their power to become a real blade and driver, fighting side by side with the one and only wielder of the Aegis as they forge towards a new world. Zeke, Pandoria, Morag and Bridget, they're a bit older than the rest, and through that act as an emotional pillar for them to rely on. Bridget was worried about betraying her past self, but found reassurance on this journey. Morag learned to live for herself and now has the opportunity to find a new purpose in this new world. And Zeke, who was always jaded from his past, but now he found his new role as a guardian for this new generation to create a better future, with Pandoria at his side. And at the core of all of this, Pyra, Mithra, and Rex, two girls who lost their will to live, only to find love in the one person who was ready to fight for them, not as weapons, but as people to be loved. Because that is what it all boils down to, as boy meets girl. Thank you for watching. That was my complete experience with Xenoblade Chronicles 2. And now that I'm done with this game, I guess that means we'll be moving on to Xenoblade Chronicles 3 soon. As you can see, I already have the game here. It's still wrapped. I bought this a while ago because it was on a sale and I didn't just want to leave it there for like 25 bucks. And I am honestly pretty excited to play this one. My feelings going into 3 honestly couldn't be more different than when I was going into the second game. There I was just praying, please God, I want to enjoy this game after being disappointed in the first title. But now I'm just like, damn, is it even possible for 3 to be better than 2? This game is in my top 20 games of all time. It is such a special experience. 3 doesn't have to top it, of course, I'm going into it open-minded, but so many people say that 3 is the best game in the trilogy, and I just can't imagine that because I love these characters and the story of the second game so much. And even if it comes close to 2, that would mean that I'd have an all-timer experience on my hands, and I cannot wait for the Switch 2 edition to release so I can finally delve into it. A small part of me is a bit worried though, considering that 1 and 3 are the most beloved titles generally, and I loved 2 way more than 1, so maybe 3 will also be a miss for me, but I like the look of this game already, and considering how much I like 2, I would be very surprised if I don't like 3 even a little bit. Mostly because of the character aspect again. The biggest reason that I didn't care for Xenoblade 1 was because I didn't really care for those characters. I felt like that title put its focus on the world and the story, with the cast falling behind a bit as a result. And I was really scared that the whole series would be like that. But then I played the sequel. All I knew was that people loved the characters like Nia, Pyra and Mithra, so I was hopeful, and thankfully it didn't disappoint. And now with Xenoblade 3, basically all I know about it is how much people love these characters once again. And I also know that there are cat girls, which is always a positive. And these cat girls apparently play the flute, which is cool, I guess. Besides that, the main thing that I am theorizing about in my head right now would be the world of the third game, because I am pretty sure that at the end of Xenoblade 2, they enter the world from the end of Xenoblade 1. And I think that that could be something really cool. And in that way, I'm guessing that Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is gonna take place like hundreds of years, maybe even thousands of years after Xenoblade 1 and 2. And in that way, they can have that intrigue again that I had at the beginning of Xenoblade 2, where you're wondering like, what is this place? Where am I? How is this related to the other games? And then at the end, it can be revealed like, oh, this is the place, this is it. And then you can think back and be like, oh my god, so if the world looks like this right now, I guess that means Rex and Nia and Pyra and Mithra did this, and I guess Melia and Shulk then did this to create that, and like, kind of in the same way that you have like the Nier games always taking place with massive time jumps in between them, and at the end it blows your mind when they show you how they're connected. I also know that 3 has a DLC, Future Redeemed, which has some big connections to the first 2 games, so maybe that one then takes place after 1 and 2, but before 3, like in between that time jump. I don't know, I just think it would be cool to have the first game in one world and the second game in another, and then have these worlds merge for the final title, so it can all tie up nicely. Now that I'm thinking about this though, I also really wonder who the villain will be, because we already had Klaus twice, so I doubt that it'll be him again, but I do know that that game is still part of the Klaus saga. But I guess that doesn't exactly mean that he has to show up. This could still be the consequences to his actions with the conduit, I guess. I also don't know if 3 has blades or not, actually. Like, I know that it doesn't have the summoning mechanic, but most characters do work in pairs, I think. I just don't know if that means that they're a driver and a blade or not. I am genuinely clueless though. I'm honestly really surprised with how little I have been spoiled on this game, considering the amount of time that I spent online and considering how many friends I have that are super into this series, and I'm very excited to finally find out all of this stuff. I just wanted to include this little theory crafting section because to me it feels like it could be very fun to look back on later, to be like, oh, so this is what I used to think about this game before I played it, and so I can see how wrong I was. And maybe for you, the viewer, it can also be fun. Like, who knows, maybe you're someone who is very deep into all of these games, and seeing someone's dumb like me speculate about the third game before even watching a trailer might be kind of nostalgic. But that is it. I'm gonna be wrapping it up here. Thank you all so much for watching. Like, genuinely, thank you so much. This video is by far the most ambitious project that I have ever made. I have spent so much time on this. It's probably my biggest video yet. I haven't really made a video like this. Like, I've made 2-hour videos before, but this is the first time that I'm really like looking at the game in a retrospective manner, really going from start to end, talking about the major events and my thoughts on them. That's also why I tried to get a little production upgrade here with like my new on-camera thing. I hope you guys liked it. Originally, I actually planned to make a video on Xenoblade 1 like this as well, and I started writing my script like that actually, but when I was on chapter 2 or something, I was like, why am I putting so much time and effort into dissecting a game that I just do not care about? And that's why that video kind of just turned into a broader sense of my disappointment with Xenoblade 1. While with this game, I was like, I love this game. I want to go in depth. I want to go deep into it. Why do I love this? Why do I love this when I don't love the other game? Like, what is it about this game that makes it work for me? Because of that reason, I'm also not sure yet what the next video is gonna be on Xenoblade Chronicles 3. Maybe it'll be a broader video again. Maybe it'll be a chapter by chapter analysis again. It's really gonna depend on what I feel like, how the game is. And I guess only time will tell. Also, let me know what you think of this game. I'm actually genuinely very curious, because this is such a controversial one. Like, maybe I'm gonna have a bunch of fans in my comment section being like, how do you like this game when you don't like Xenoblade 1? It doesn't make any sense. Just, like, let me know your thoughts. I will be reading the comments. I'm down there a lot. And while you're down there, be sure to leave a like, leave that comment, and check out my channel. Like, genuinely, any support is greatly appreciated, because this video took me forever to make, and I promise that my next video will not take this long to make. My upload schedule should be going back to a bit of a steadier pace, let's say, but I'm actually gonna wrap it up this time. So thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed it, and hopefully I'll see you all again soon.